Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 1, What Type of Weapon? Linley had suddenly gained an insight and broken through, right at that critical moment when the sovereign had descended, and became a Highgod. This caused Beirut and a few others to snicker in amusement, but quite a few others present were completely shocked. The most stunned of all were the experts of the 8 great clans. This Linley became a Highgod. Patriarch Bullen stared at Linley. He actually became a Highgod. Patriarch Edric and the others all had very complicated looks on their faces. Even if the sovereign hadn't descended, we probably would still have to leave. The Nether Serpent Patriarch sighed. The reason behind their 1,000 years of savagery was because they were worried about Linley. They believed that the god-level Linley had to have fused at least 5 profound mysteries for him, given his power. And once Linley became a Highgod, he probably would have fused all 6 types and become a Highgod Paragon. The terrifying power of a Highgod Paragon would be no lower than Beirut's. Fortunately, he didn't make his breakthrough earlier. Patriarch Rainales whispered. Right. The various patriarchs all had very chaotic, mixed emotions right now. The descent of the sovereign had caused them to make an unwilling decision. But now that Linley had become a Highgod, they were frightened at the close call they had. Once a Highgod Paragon began a slaughter, the experts of their 8 great clans would be like ragdolls for dismembering. Just look at Beirut. He even dared to block attacks from sovereign artifacts head-on. Who could resist such a monster? The 4 Divine Beasts clan is so lucky, for such a genius to have appeared in their ranks. Patriarch Barbary said in a low voice. Let's hurry up and leave. It really is time to leave. The various patriarchs all turned and left. They didn't dare to violate the orders of a sovereign, and Linley's presence made it so that they left of their own accord as well. No matter what, today, the matters between the 4 Divine Beasts clan and the 8 great clans had come to an end. The members of the 4 Divine Beasts clan were all completely delirious with excitement and joy. Quite a few clansmen began to weep on the spot. From this day onwards, their 4 Divine Beasts clan would no longer have to experience countless dangers and live a life of humiliation. It's over. Haha, it's finally over. Celebratory voices rang out in the air above the Skirite Mountains. Many clansmen were so excited that they fell to their knees, sobbing. The constant insults and taunts they had suffered in recent days from the 8 great clans had been a sort of psychological torture to the 4 Divine Beasts clan. Finally, it was over. The forces of the 8 great clans have left. BB said. Linley turned to look as well. The patriarchs and elders led the way, and the clansmen of the 8 great clans, like a massive, roiling flood of locusts, flew into the air, then boarded multiple metallic life forms and left at high speed, leaving behind only those many empty castles and buildings. It's all over. Gislason had a very complicated look on his face. The White Tiger Patriarch let out an emotional sigh as well. 10,000 years. 10,000 nightmarish years. Finally, it's over. Our clansmen won't have to hide in the Skirite Mountains. And won't have to always be afraid. Every single member of the 4 Divine Beasts clan felt extremely relaxed now. Lord Beirut. We will forever remember your great kindness. Gislason was the first to bow, and then all of the other 3 clan leaders and elders all bowed respectfully as well. Beirut laughed calmly. If you want to thank someone, thank the sovereign. But Gislason and the others all understood that the blood-rich sovereign and the 4 Divine Beasts clan didn't have much of connection. If the blood-rich sovereign had truly wanted to save the 4 Divine Beasts clan, he would have shown himself long ago. But he had only done so today. Most likely, the reason for this had something to do with Beirut. Everyone. Gislason's voice suddenly rang out, and it echoed in the air above the Skirite Mountains. Instantly, the countless clansmen all turned their gazes towards him. Gislason said in a sonorous voice, "Today is a day of rejoicing. Over the past 10,000 years, our four divine beasts clan has always been under tremendous pressure, and one elder after another has perished in battle for the clan. Today, we members of the four divine beasts clan have finally once more regained our freedom to roam the skies of the infernal realm. We absolutely must celebrate this wonderful event. All clansmen will celebrate for 3 days. Wonderful! A 3-day grand celebration. Instantly, countless joyful voices rang out, reverberating throughout the air above the Skirite Mountains. Lord Beirut, Fusro, the two of you absolutely must attend our celebration. Gislason looked towards Beirut. Definitely. Beirut laughed calmly and nodded. Haha. Fusro chortled, then glanced sideways at Linley. As he did, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. Linley, you made a breakthrough just as you saw the sovereign. I, Fusro, have lived countless years, but I've never seen such a thing. Linley could only grin rather awkwardly. You did see the sovereign, right? Beirut laughed. As soon as I saw him, he left. Linley still felt rather stunned. Actually, at the moment of the sovereign's descent, Linley had already become absorbed in the insights he had gained upon watching the battle between the Grand Elder and Patriarch Barbary. Linley had no idea as to when the sovereign had arrived and what he had said. However, from what everyone else was saying, Linley realized that the departure of the 8 great clans was due to them obeying the orders of the sovereign. Sovereigns really are sovereigns. With but a single sentence, the 8 great clans were forced to obediently leave. In Linley's mind, he could still see that massive black face, tens of meters high, that stood in mid-air. He also remembered the terrifying gaze of those 2 eyes. The supremacy of a sovereign. Linley, having experienced it, would never forget it. Let's go. Your clan is going to have a huge celebration. Beirut laughed, then flew into the air. Linley, Bibi, Fusro, Delia, and the others all followed Beirut into the air. As for Gislason and the other clan leaders, they had left early on to go arrange the banquet. This celebration would be one that was held throughout the Skirite Mountains. While flying, Beirut suddenly began to laugh at himself. Linley couldn't help but to turn and look at him. Beirut glanced at him, then said resignedly, Linley, I really did make more work for myself. I wanted to give you some encouragement. So said that I would give you a Godspark weapon after you became a Highgod, but who would have imagined that a few moments later, you would suddenly break through. Indeed. Linley really was a bit too efficient. Grandpa, you have to forge a good Godspark weapon for my boss. Bibi said hurriedly. Since I've given my word, of course I'll do it. Beirut nodded, then looked at Linley. Speak, Linley. What sort of weapon do you want me to make for you? Even Fusro began to laugh loudly. Linley, although Beirut's Godspark weapons aren't sovereign artifacts, in terms of toughness and hardness, they are comparable to sovereign artifacts. In the infernal realm, the Godspark weapons of Beirut are priceless treasures that can't be bought. I want. Linley pondered for a moment. He had the Coiling Dragon Ring, and his soul had just improved greatly. After he refined more amethysts in the future and repaired the Coiling Dragon Ring, his soul defense would rise to an extremely high level. What he lacked right now, was defense against material attacks. Lord Beirut, you can go ahead and forge a set of Godspark armor that can fuse with my scales, just like the one the Grand Elder has. That'll let my punches and kicks become tremendously powerful as well. Linley said eagerly. With a set of armor, he could use it for both attack and defense. A dual-purpose artifact. The smile on Beirut's face suddenly turned stiff and forced. Boss, you want a set of armor? Bibi stared at Linley as well. Linley, you really are something. Fusro stared at Linley, not knowing whether to laugh or to cry. Linley was rather amazed, and he looked at them in confusion. What? Is this request of mine very excessive? Beirut had a very strange look on his face. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. In the end, it was BB who explained. Boss, forging God spark weapons is an ability inherent to and unique to us God Eater rats. It requires us to devour divine sparks, then refine the essence within, then coalesce the essence into the shape of a weapon. But every single divine spark is very small, and the amount of essence that can be refined from each one is tiny. Digesting a divine spark takes a long time as well, thus, to forge a large weapon, just think about how many divine sparks will be needed, how much time would be needed, and how much effort it would take. It's very hard. That's why God spark weapons are generally very small. BB explained. Linley began to understand. He also remembered how the God spark weapon in BB's possession was just a dagger. As for Gislazen's set of God spark weapons, it was a pair of gloves. They were all very small weapons. But what he requested was a set of armor that could cover his entire body. In terms of size, it was probably dozens of times, perhaps even 100 times larger than BB's dagger. A set of armor that can cover your entire body. To make this, I'll probably have to work for thousands of years without resting. Beirut felt quite a bit of pressure. But he had already given his word. Lord Beirut, I apologize. I didn't understand much about the forging of God spark weapons. Linley said hurriedly. He didn't want to make things too hard for Beirut. Just make a sharp sword for me. It just needs to be comparable to Blood Violet in length. What Linley lacked right now was attack power. With an extremely sharp God spark sword, his attack power would rise significantly. Comparable to Blood Violet. Beirut let out a sigh of relief. Perhaps the amount of divine spark essence needed to make a longsword was somewhat more than what was needed for a dagger or a set of gloves, but, what Linley needed right now was, quite clearly, that sort of thin, sharp sword. The amount of divine spark essence needed would just be a few times more than what was needed for a dagger. Lord Beirut, what I lack right now is attack power, and so the sharper this God spark weapon, the better. Linley said. Beirut said confidently, forging something as hard as a God spark weapon and making it sharp is very easy, however, to forge this God spark weapon, I'll still need to spend roughly 100 years. You have to wait for a time. No rush, I'm in no rush. Linley laughed. The Four Divine Beasts clan was in a state of peace now, and he himself had become a Highgod. Linley couldn't think of anything he had to do right away. The only thing he had to do was spend time with his family, and continue training as much as he could. The members of the Four Divine Beasts clan all went wild. They all celebrated madly, and be it at the Patriarch's residence or remote areas such as that Great Gorge, banquets could be seen everywhere. Everyone from the Patriarch to recently born saints were all celebrating. Linley, as an elder, naturally was toasted by many people. After 3 days passed. Within the Great Gorge. The clansmen have all gone crazy with joy. Linley laughed as he looked outside the window. The 3 days of mad celebration had caused the entire Skirite Mountains to be filled with a festive aura. The stifled, depressed aura that had been present for so many years had been wiped away all at once. Everyone was exceedingly happy. You've been smiling non-stop for the past 3 days. Delia couldn't help but laugh. Linley laughed and nodded. Right, Delia. That day, when I became a Highgod, I didn't have the chance to carefully inspect myself, and I've been too busy the past 3 days as well. You go take care of something else. I'm going to spend some time investigating myself. Linley said, then sat down in the meditative position on their bed. Delia, seeing this, just laughed, then walked out of the room. After having reached the Highgod level, he had been baptized once more by the natural laws. The soul of Linley's Highgod Earth clone had increased in power nearly tenfold. Although the other souls weren't strengthened much, still. Linley's 5 souls were in reality all one soul. Under the influence of his divine Earth clone's soul, the other 4 souls were slowly improving as well. Actually, as long as Linley took his divine earth clone into his original body, then the spiritual strength of the divine earth clone would become the spiritual strength of his original body. After all, they were one to begin with. A little while later, I'll need to spend some time refining some amethysts. With a thought, Linley reached out and connected with the plane of the elemental sea. The elemental sea. This was a vast, roiling, endless, boundless sea of earth and yellow light. The deeper into the sea one looked, the higher level the quality of the energy of the sea water. By now, Linley had become a Highgod. He could already see very deep into the sea, and deep within the sea, a large amount of liquefied Highgod level divine earth power was present. What a thick, dense layer of Highgod level divine earth power. When I had become a Highgod earlier, I was too worried about the clan, so I didn't spend much time examining this bottom layer, and to see what it has. Linley controlled his divine sense to delve still deeper into the elemental sea. An incredibly dense and incomparably powerful aura spread out as waves of earth and water swirled about at the bottom. The earth and yellow water was clearly different from the ordinary liquefied divine power. That should be. Linley's divine sense wasn't able to go down any further, but he was able to vaguely sense the aura of Sovereign's might. Right. It is Sovereign's might. After having seen Sovereign's might for so long, Linley completely understood. After all, the depths at which he could investigate was still a ways off from the deepest reaches. The bottom of this elemental sea is filled with sovereign power. Linley was rather stupefied. The bottom of the elemental sea was boundless and limitless. So much sovereign power made one grow desirous just looking at it, but Highgods had a limit to the depths at which they could investigate. There was no way they would be able to actually acquire any of it. Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 2, Mirage. Deep within the elemental sea, invisible currents of power swirled about, and the endless waves of water formed from sovereign power rolled forth. I can see it, but I can't get it. Linley felt an itchy feeling in his heart. So much sovereign power. However, the elemental sea was something which every single deity could sense. Highgods had more powerful souls, and thus were generally all able to sense the region containing sovereign power. The souls of sovereigns are far more powerful than the souls of us Highgods. Linley quickly cast it aside. If he couldn't get it, there was no point obsessing over it. Who knows if there is perhaps a region of even more powerful energy beneath the region of sovereign power. This thought suddenly appeared in Linley's mind, but moments later, Linley shook his head, no longer considering it. I don't even have sovereign power. Why think of other things? But it really is odd. Divine power is divided into demigod-level divine power, god-level divine power, and high-god-level divine power. But I have never heard anyone say that there are different levels of sovereign power. After having lived in the clan for many years, Linley had come to learn. The 7 elemental laws and 4 edicts each had 7 sovereigns, with 1 being a high sovereign, 2 being intermediate sovereigns, and 4 being lesser sovereigns. Clearly, sovereigns were divided into levels as well. But why is it that I've never heard of there being different levels of sovereign power? Linley was very puzzled. The 4 divine beasts clan and the 8 great clans all had sovereign's might. In addition, Linley had never before gotten the feeling that one person's sovereign's might was more powerful than another's. It seemed as though they were all the same. Can it be that different levels of sovereigns all have the same type of sovereign power? But why then are they divided into high, intermediate, and lesser sovereigns? Linley couldn't understand it, and so he stopped thinking about it. After all, each law had only 7 sovereigns. Every single sovereign was a lofty figure. Even the most powerful of Highgods was incomparably weak in the face of a sovereign. Linley then inspected his soul-protecting sovereign artifact. He saw rays of spiritual energy circulate throughout it, and a small membrane had appeared over the flaw as well. As spiritual energy continued to circulate through the artifact, the bandage over the flaw was slowly transforming. Indeed, Only after becoming a Highgod can I truly begin to repair this soul-protecting sovereign artifact. Linley sighed in amazement. The repairing speed was now far faster than it had been when he was a mere god. It was like a situation where flood waters were bursting through a broken dam. If you threw little pebbles down into the hole, even if you threw many pebbles non-stop, they would be effortlessly wiped away by the flood waters. But if you threw large numbers of boulders down, boulders which were dozens of times larger, then the effect would immediately be much better. The same was true for repairing this artifact. The spiritual energy of a god was, qualitatively, too inferior to a soul-protecting sovereign artifact. Thus, repairing with it was too difficult. Ever since the sovereign's descent, the 4 divine beasts clan and the 8 great clans had ended their struggles against each other. The lives of the members of the 4 divine beasts clan had returned to tranquility. Linley's family and Bibi's family thus began to live a peaceful life within the gorge as well. Linley constantly consumed amethysts, strengthening his soul. Towards the end, Linley actually used up all of the amethysts which he had. He had to end up asking Bibi for many amethysts, allowing himself to continue refining them. Bibi had said magnanimously, "Boss, you just keep refining. I'll give you as many as you want." In the past, Bibi had spent 10 full years harvesting amethysts in the Amethyst Mountains. The number of amethysts he had collected was truly astronomical. In the blink of an eye, a century passed. Within the gorge, Linley's room. A long table was covered with food. Linley's family of 3 and Bibi's family of 3 were all gathered here. Delia, Nissa, Wade, and Ina were all handing plates of food back and forth, while Linley and Bibi were seated comfortably. "Boss, how much more can your soul absorb?" Bibi asked. "You've already absorbed so many amethysts." Upon reaching the Highgod level, Linley's amethyst refining speed had increased tens of times over as well. As his soul had risen in power, his refining speed had only grown even faster. The number of amethysts he had absorbed over the past century was an astonishingly high figure. But clearly, the soul of a Highgod truly was capable of absorbing a great deal of power. "What, jealous?" Linley pursed his lips. "Bibi, as I recall, in the past, you wanted to compete with me in seeing who would become a Highgod first." Bibi rubbed his nose. All he could do was manage a resigned laugh. That time they had gone to Mir City, Bibi had acquired from his grandmother that final soul slice fragment. After absorbing it, Bibi only needed one final step before reaching the Highgod level. But Bibi's speed clearly was much slower than Linley's. Linley had gained his sudden insight, but Bibi had not. "Boss, you are amazing." "Happy?" Bibi said resignedly, a sour look on his face. "Still. Grandpa told me that once I become a Highgod, my power will be close to Grandpa's power in strength." "Boss, you are powerful right now, but when I become a Highgod, I might end up being even more powerful than you." "Being more powerful than me is a good thing." Linley laughed. Linley knew well what innate gifts Bibi had. This innate divine ability, Godator, could be described as something which made Bibi invincible amongst his peers. Once Bibi reached the Highgod level, who would be able to resist his Godator ability? Perhaps only Highgod paragons would be able to resist it? In addition, as a Godator rat, Bibi's body was frightfully strong. Just by watching how Beirut dared to use his hands to block sovereign artifacts, one could imagine how astonishing a Godator rat would be at the Highgod level. Bibi hadn't fused any profound mysteries at all, but by relying on his innate gifts, he would still be comparable to Linley after he became a Highgod. Still, Linley wasn't jealous in the slightest. Over all these years, Linley and Bibi truly were like siblings, and they were happy for each other as they grew strong. "I want to break through and gain a sudden insight too. Why is it so hard?" Bibi let out a long sigh. Right at this moment, Wade walked over, carrying a platter of food. Hearing these words, he couldn't help but say, "Uncle Bibi, I want to make a breakthrough also. When I became a deity, I only did so thanks to the ancestral baptism. It's hard for me to even become a god by myself. Humph. A low, dissatisfied snort. Ina walked in, carrying a plate of food as well. Big bro, wait, in the future, can you not complain about your situation? I'm still, not even a deity yet. Immediately, Linley and Bibi both began to laugh. Dayod. You uncle. Ina couldn't help but stare at them, but Linley and Bibi only laughed all the harder. Haha, what has all of you laughing so happily? A loud, clear laugh rang out, and two figures descended from the skies. Linley turned his head to look. It was a black-robed Beirut and a red-robed Carolina. Beirut's appearance made Linley's eyes light up. This was because when he saw Beirut, he thought of that God's Park weapon. Beirut hadn't come to visit a single time over the past century. This time, had he come because he had finished forging the God's Park weapon. Grandpa. Bibi was extremely happy as well. Beirut just laughed, then turned his head to look at Ina. Ina, come over here. Beirut and Carolina both doted dearly on Ina. Ina immediately walked over to greet them and chatted with Beirut and Carolina for a while. Grandpa, is this visit of yours because the God's Park weapon is finished? Bibi went straight to the point. Beirut, hearing this, looked towards Linley, then laughed loudly. Linley, for the sake of this God's Park weapon of yours, I spent a full 100 years. I've finally finished now. Take it. As he spoke, Beirut waved his arm. And suddenly, an illusory black blur sliced through the air. Linley stretched his hand out, directly snatching that sharp sword. But the illusory shadow of the sword was too blurry, and Beirut had thrown it out too quickly, with the intention of making Linley look bad. When Linley caught it, he grabbed it by the blade instead of the hilt. So sharp. Linley felt pain in his hand, and a line of blood sprang out from his palm. He lowered his head. The sword was long and slender, as thin as a butterfly's wings. This long sword was actually translucent. If one took a close look at the sword, one would see that a black energy was circulating inside of the sword. It was very bizarre. Generally speaking, divine swords would have energy circulating on their surface, but this sword had black energy circulating inside of it, causing one to be stupefied. In particular, the sharpness of the sword was so terrifying as to make one's heart grow cold. Although Linley hadn't transformed, he was a Highgod, his body was fairly tough. This sword wasn't bound by anyone, but just by its sharpness alone, it had cut through the palm of Linley, a Highgod. This sword, Linley couldn't believe it. Sharp enough for you? Beirut laughed. Linley hurriedly nodded. It truly is sharp. I've never seen such a sharp weapon before. Grandpa, how did you make it? Why isn't my dagger this sharp? Bibi said hurriedly. Beirut laughed and said, actually, I myself am puzzled as to how this sword ended up like this. These words caused Linley, Delia, Bibi, and everyone else to be puzzled. Beirut continued, I knew that Linley trained in earth, wind, fire, and water, 4 types of elemental laws. Thus, when I forged this sword for you, I consciously only chose to devour and digest Highgod divine sparks of earth, wind, fire, and water. Linley couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. Actually, when making a God's Park weapon, one could just pick some divine sparks at random for the forging. However, Beirut had gone out of his way to be very detailed and careful in this forging for Linley, and so had only used those 4 types of divine sparks. I was very careful in the forging. In the later stages, though, Beirut laughed. This sword actually somehow became like one solid whole. Those 4 different types of divine sparks essences actually fused to become a perfect whole. The power of this God's Park weapon is such that it is the finest God's Park weapon I have ever made in all these years. Linley couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. Lord Beirut. Thank you. Linley said gratefully. Beirut truly had expended significant effort in forging this weapon for him. Bibi, as for your dagger, I only used darkness-type divine sparks to forge it. After all, you have only become a deity in darkness. Beirut laughed calmly. As for Linley's sword, I'm not too clear as to why the power of it is so great, myself. Sometimes, one might end up creating a perfect masterwork, for reasons one might not even understand. Perhaps a true masterwork required a bit of luck as well. Linley carefully stroked this sharp sword. The blood from his cut palm fused into the sword, and this sharp sword which had never before had an owner soon became wholly accepting of Linley, becoming Linley's personal sword. Curious. Curious. Linley discovered, after taking complete control of the sword, that with but a thought, the energy flowing within the sword could suddenly become hidden, resulting in the entire sword becoming translucent. Someone looking at it would think that Linley wasn't even holding a sword at all. Linley, pick a name. Beirut laughed. Linley stared thoughtfully at this incredible weapon. When using this sword at high speed, even experts will just be able to see a blurry shadow, so let's just call it Mirage. Linley's third weapon, Mirage, had arrived in this world. After acquiring this precious weapon, Mirage, he naturally would often use it to train. The more he used it, the happier Linley became. Once this precious weapon was filled with Highgod level divine power and matched with Linley's tremendous physical strength in dragon form. Even Linley was astonished by the power of each sword stroke. Linley had originally used his fist to execute the firmament splitter with enough power to punch a hole in space itself. But, when this incomparably sharp and tough Mirage used the technique, space itself would tremble, and wherever the shadow of the sword passed, a tear in space would be left behind. Within the gorge, on the grassy field outside of Linley's house, Linley was currently wielding Mirage, casually twirling it about. His entire body seemed to have become a gust of wind, fusing with it. One could only see the blurry shadow of an illusory sword, also as agile and untraceable as the wind. Slash. Swish. Wherever the sword passed, rips in space appeared. It must be understood, this was Linley in his normal, human form. But of course, this was Linley as a high god and in possession of a godspark weapon. Nonetheless, one could still imagine how powerful Linley had become now, thanks to these factors. Great. Uncle, you are so powerful. Ina stood off in the distance, her eyes shining as she watched Linley train with the sword. Right at this moment. Rumble. Ripples born from the descent of the natural laws suddenly descended. Even Linley, in the midst of training with his sword, came to a halt. He turned his head to stare towards the location where the ripples were emanating from. Huh? Bibi's residence. Can it be that Bibi has made a breakthrough? Linley still remembered the words that Bibi had spoken to him, once I become a high god, maybe I'll be even more powerful than you. Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 3, Goals. The descent of the natural laws attracted attention from many of the dwellers within the gorge. The members of the Yulan branch all hurried over, looking towards the building where Linley, Ina, Delia, and the others lived. The clansmen watched as Barak walked over as well, and they immediately parted for him. Barak walked towards Linley. Linley, who made the breakthrough? Is it Bibi? Barak knew that this building was one where Bibi lived in, and so it was very normal for him to come to this conclusion. Linley was in an excellent mood, and he laughed while nodding. Bibi actually became a high god. He's even faster than me. Barak shook his head and laughed. Barak had also reached a bottleneck in the laws of water, and would become a high god with one more step. Clan leader, perhaps tomorrow, you'll become a high god as well. Linley said consolingly. How could Barak compete against Bibi? Bibi had those soul slice fragments, and thus rose in power at an unnatural speed. Uncle, my father is now a high god as well. Is he going to be as powerful as you? Ina's eyes were shining as she looked towards Linley. Not so fast. The nearby Wade said confidently. Uncle BB just reached the Highgod level, he's going to need time for training, whereas my father was able to kill 7 star fiends even before he reached the Highgod level. He's much more powerful now. Wade clearly felt very proud of Linley. But father himself said, Ina didn't really understand. He'll be a match for me. Linley laughed calmly. Father, Wade looked towards Linley, puzzled. Wade, even I don't feel confident in my ability to resist your Uncle BB's innate divine ability. Linley explained. Once BB reached the Highgod level, his normal attacks might be ordinary in power, but his innate divine ability, Godator, was without question an absolutely dominating ability. How many Highgods would be able to endure the Godator attack? After all, there wasn't even a way one would be able to counter the Godator technique. Boss, stop boasting about me. A voice rang out, and BB, wearing that straw hat, walked out of the room with a chortle. Father. Ina immediately ran over. Linley just laughed in surprise. BB, being so modest? How rare. This was completely different from BB's normal temperament. Linley could sense that BB had indeed reached the Highgod level. Come inside and sit. Nissa welcomed everyone warmly. Linley, Barak, and the others all immediately entered the living room. Nissa quickly prepared beverages for everyone. BB's face was all smiles, and he was so delighted that even his eyebrows were jumping up and down. Laughing loudly, he said, Boss, don't boast about me any longer. After having become a Highgod, I know what level of power I now have. Oh. Linley said, puzzled. I finally understand that Grandpa Beirut tricked me. BB said resignedly. Beirut had once told BB that once BB became a Highgod, his power would be close to Beirut's. My most powerful attack is indeed comparable to Grandpa Beirut's. But that's just my innate divine ability. I'm at most able to use my innate divine ability twice before my spiritual energy is essentially used up. Without my innate divine ability, all I'm good for is taking hits. I'm pretty much an unkillable humanoid golem. BB clearly was rather unhappy. Compared to Grandpa, I'm still a long way off. Linley laughed. BB, with that innate divine ability, within a short period of time, you'd at least be able to kill 2 supreme experts. That's enough. Linley said. Your grandfather didn't lie to you. When you execute that innate divine ability, how many Highgods can possibly overcome you? BB sighed emotionally. I heard that when Grandpa blocked the 8 great clans in the past, he only used a single black staff. Every single elder of the 8 great clans who was struck by that staff immediately died, and even the patriarchs who used sovereign artifacts against it were badly injured. Grandpa never even used his innate divine ability. Linley couldn't help but shake his head. BB, your grandfather has fused quite a few profound mysteries. Linley said. You haven't even fused one. How can you compete against your grandfather? Lord Beirut's punches and kicks already possessed such tremendous power, but as for BB, he had to use his innate divine ability to fight at that level. Clearly, BB was rather unhappy about this. The nearby Barak said in a booming voice, BB, innate gifts is one thing, but hard work is necessary as well. I, too, have heard that the strength of your body is even greater than Linley's dragon form. But you haven't fused any of the profound mysteries at all. I imagine that given how Lord Beirut can be one of the ultimate figures of the entire infernal realm, he surely must have fused quite a few profound mysteries. Right. BB nodded. Linley could guess, however, that the toughness and strength of a Highgod Godator rat's body was probably comparable to a divine spark. Most likely, it was tens of times or even 100 times more powerful than his dragon form. As for Lord Beirut, most likely, even if he only fused 4 or 5 profound mysteries, he would still be more than powerful enough to dominate the continents. With a powerful body as the base, matched with 4 or 5 fused profound mysteries, Beirut definitely had the ability to trample all comers in the infernal realm, especially since he had a sovereign artifact. Who knows how many profound mysteries Lord Beirut has fused? Linley was curious. In the past, from the conversation between Linley and Beirut, Linley had learned that Beirut hadn't reached the paragon level. However, his innate gifts were simply too powerful. Even if he only fused 4 or 5 profound mysteries, he would be comparable to a Highgod paragon. I need to work hard to fuse profound mysteries as well. BB clenched his teeth. Seeing the look on BB's face, Linley couldn't help but laugh. Then BB, I'm just going to wait and see how well you do in your fusing. BB. Suddenly, the nearby Nissa spoke out. BB looked towards her. Have you forgotten something? Nissa stared at BB. Something very important. Nissa's stare caused BB to feel rather puzzled. He couldn't help but scratch his head. What are you talking about? Nissa was so upset, she didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. In the end, she explained, back then, you told me that after you became a Highgod, then. Oh, are you saying, go pay a visit to your brother, Salomon? BB immediately realized what she was talking about, and his face went sour. You were serious about that? Nissa's face immediately became unsightly, and she fell silent. That look on Nissa's face caused the atmosphere of the entire hall to become rather awkward. Linley frowned, then immediately sent through divine sense, BB, what's this about? Today clearly was a festive day, how did it end up being so unhappy? Boss, Nissa's been here all these years, and has always wanted to go visit her elder brother, Salomon. But you know as well as I do, Salomon, that fellow who forgets the kindness of others, should feel lucky that I don't go kill him. Go pay a visit to him. But at the time, I didn't want Nissa to feel so awkward, so I coaxed her and told her that I wasn't strong enough yet, and that the trip back would be dangerous. I said that after I became a Highgod, I would have enough strength to escort her to the Jade Float continent. I just spoke casually, wanting to make her feel better, but who would have imagined that she always kept these words in her heart? BB had a sour look on his face. Linley completely understood. BB hadn't been serious about it, but Nissa had always remembered it. After all, after the death of her parents, all she had left was her elder brother. Although Salomon hadn't treated Linley and the others with sincerity, he had always been devoted to his younger sister. In the past, you just said that to make me feel better. Nissa finally spoke, a hint of moisture in her eyes. BB was stunned, but he was the obstinate sort. Back then, he used his ultimate attack with that Godspark weapon, wanting to kill Salomon with that dagger. Afterwards, the 7-star fiend, Elkin, blocked his attack to save Salomon, resulting in Elkin even losing a divine artifact of his own. Given the situation, how could BB willingly lower his head and go pay a visit to Salomon? Most likely, in Salomon's heart, he also felt a hint of hatred towards BB. Ninny, the way your elder brother acted towards me that year, and the fact that he tried to get my boss and Delia killed, just as BB said these things, Nissa's tears actually began to uncontrollably leak outwards. Nissa only had this one brother, after all. Delia, seeing this, knew that things were headed in a bad direction. She immediately said through divine sense, BB, stop saying these things. Although Salomon's actions back then could be considered unrighteous, it was because he falsely believed Linley had betrayed him. For Nissa's sake, make the trip. Otherwise, Nissa will forever have a thorn in her heart. Linley agrees with me on this. Delia simultaneously sent the divine sense into Linley's mind as well. Clearly, Delia knew that Linley's words were the most effective for persuading BB. Forget it, BB. Give Salomon a chance. If Salomon refuses to show regret and change his ways, then you can act accordingly. Linley sent mentally. Linley could imagine how Nissa felt. After all, Nissa hadn't done anything wrong. She was blameless in this matter. Fine, boss. I'll give that fellow one chance. Bibi glanced at Linley, then said towards Nissa, your elder brother really was a bastard for doing what he did. My brother has regretted it ever since. He really didn't know. He mistakenly accused you, which is why he acted that way. Afterwards, he really regretted it. Nissa said hurriedly. Bibi reached out with his hand, taking Nissa's. Ninny, fine then. For your sake, I'll accompany you on a visit to see your elder brother, but with regards to the question of whether or not I'll give him face when I see him, that will depend entirely on his attitude. If he still acts that way, then you can't blame me. Bibi still couldn't swallow his anger. My elder brother will definitely apologize. Nissa said hurriedly, and a hint of a smile appeared on her face once more. Father, mother. Ina finally dared to speak out. I want to go with you as well. No way. Bibi frowned. Ina, you haven't even become a deity. We'll be going to the Jade Float continent. The journey will be a long one, and if we encounter any danger on the way over, the slightest shockwave will kill you. Nissa agreed. Nana, wait for the future. Seeing that both her father and her mother were of one mind, Ina felt helpless as well. The next day, as per Nissa's request, Bibi accompanied Nissa. The two left the Skirite Mountains, heading towards the cold calm prefecture of the Jade Float continent. This was a very long trip, and the round trip would most likely take nearly a century. As for Linley and Delia, they accompanied Wade and Ina in a tour of Indigo Prefecture. Despite having been in Indigo Prefecture for so many years, they hadn't had a chance to visit many of the famous places of Indigo Prefecture. While they encountered some difficulties when adventuring in the Indigo Prefecture, given Linley's power, he was able to effortlessly resolve them. In the blink of an eye, 100 years of roaming about had passed. During these 100 years, Linley's 4 divine clones had focused on their training, with the fastest gains being made by his divine water clone, which finally started on a 6th profound mystery. His divine wind clone was working on the 8th profound mystery as well, but his divine fire clone was doing terribly, still stuck on 4 mastered profound mysteries, and not having made any progress in gaining even a basic understanding of the other 2. Clearly, Linley's talent with regards to fire was significantly weaker. Within the metallic life form, Linley was seated on a chair. Linley, you've reached the 6th profound mystery in water. Look at how happy you are. Delia brought over a plate of food and wine. Linley's eyes were gleaming. Wrong. I'm not happy because I've reached the 6th profound mystery in water. Rather, it's because my profound mysteries of strength and gravitational space have started to connect just slightly. Linley was indescribably happy. It's been 200 years. More than 2 centuries have passed since the affairs between our 4 Divine Beasts clan and the 8 great clans have come to an end. I've finally made a small improvement in the laws of the earth. This improvement signifies that I have hope of fusing 4 profound mysteries. Fusing 4? How long will it take? Delia asked. Not sure. Although the profound mysteries of strength are fusing with the essence of the earth and gravitational space, it's just a connection, they aren't completely fused yet. Fortunately, it is completely fused with the throbbing pulse of the world. After the other 2 are completely fused, I'll have 4 profound mysteries, fused into one. Linley knew very well that in order to have 4 mysteries fused, he would have to separately fuse the profound mysteries of strength with the other 3 profound mysteries. And then, he would begin a final, complete fusion. But how long will it take? Delia asked again. If I'm fast, a few centuries or 1,000 years. If I'm slow, 10,000 years. Linley laughed. So long. Delia laughed as well. Linley said solemnly, Delia, I've been training for roughly 2,000 years now, in total. If I continue to train at this rate, to be able to fuse 4 profound mysteries within 10,000 years is a cause for celebration. Linley stared out at the infernal realm from outside the window. I no longer have any regrets. I only hope that one day, I will reach the peak of training. Whether it be in 10,000 years, a million years, or even longer, I will continue to pursue my goals. Linley's eyes were filled with a hopeful light. That year, Doering Coward had set him on the path of training. Although Linley's #1 priority had been revenge, while training to gain his revenge, Linley had fallen in love with training, and the feeling of constantly exceeding his own limits. Linley, you will definitely succeed. I will accompany you the entire time, and wait for you to reach that peak. Delia couldn't help but take Linley's hands into her own and say in a soft voice. Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 4, Iron Knife Gorge. Linley tightly held Delia's hand as well. The pinnacle, right. That day will definitely come, one day. Linley, in his heart, would forever remember the figures of Beirut and Dunnington. They were his goals. Suddenly, a snicker from his side. Linley turned to look, only to see Wade and Ina secretly looking towards them. Upon seeing that Linley had noticed them, the two quickly retreated to their own rooms. Linley couldn't help but laugh. Wade, Nana, hurry up and come over. Right, Nana, your father and your mother have already returned to the Blood Ridge continent. They are now heading to Indigo Prefecture. Most likely, in a year or so, they'll have returned. Father is about to return. Ina stuck her head out, a look of surprise and delight on her face. Linley laughed and nodded. As he and Bibi were spiritually linked, the two could sense the rough location of each other. Oh, that was pretty fast. The nearby Delia said. Bibi and Nissa, on this round trip. Just spent a bit more than a century. It seems they didn't stay too long in the cold calm prefecture. I wonder how Bibi and Salomon acted towards each other. Linley laughed calmly. No matter what, Bibi won't let himself get the worst of it. Given Bibi's current level of power, how could Salomon be a match for him? Although Salomon was Nissa's older brother, given Bibi's temper, Linley knew very well that if Salomon went too far, even if Bibi didn't kill him out of consideration for Nissa, he would still punish Salomon. Linley, how about let's go visit Lord Beirut? It's been so many years since we have visited. We can wait for Bibi there as well. Delia advised. Great, great. Let's go to great-grandfather's place. Ina was the first to react. The Lord Prefect's residence of Indigo Prefecture. Linley, indeed, had never visited this place before. He immediately laughed and nodded, fine, then. Let's go to Lord Beirut's place. Bibi knows exactly where I am, so he'll head directly there as well. Linley's group immediately turned the direction of their metallic life form, sending it towards the Lord Prefect's residence. Indigo Prefecture. The Lord Prefect's residence. This was located in the northern part of the northern district of Indigo City, the chief city of the 10 great cities of Indigo Prefecture. The more than half of the entire northern district seemed to reserved for the Lord Prefect, while the personal soldiers and servants of the Lord Prefect numbered in the tens of thousands. Linley's arrival naturally resulted in a warm welcome from Beirut. Linley's group thus settled down here for now. In the blink of an eye, nearly a year passed. Linley and Delia were currently strolling through a flower garden, which was filled with all sorts of fresh flowers. Red ones, blue ones, yellow ones, flowers were spread everywhere. The couple strolled while enjoying the fragrance of the flowers. This was indeed a very enjoyable thing. But suddenly, Linley turned to look towards the west, smiling slightly. He then turned his head to look at the nearby Delia. Delia, Bibi, and Nissa have already reached Indigo City. I imagine that they'll arrive soon. They'll arrive soon. Delia couldn't help but reveal a hint of joy, but then she was rather puzzled. Delia, what is it? Speak. Linley and Delia had been together for so long that Linley could tell from a single glance or a look on Delia's face what she was thinking. Delia hesitated, then said, Linley, we've been in the infernal realm for nearly 2,000 years. The Four Divine Beasts clan has already solved its crisis, and you have become a Highgod. I think that it might be time for us to return to the Yulan continent, right? Sasha and Taylor, our two kids, I really want to see them. Linley was stunned. Return to the Yulan continent? Instantly, Linley's mind became filled with countless scenes. Going to study when he was young at the Ernst Institute. Playing around with Boss Yale, George, and Reynolds. Bitter training within the mountain range of magical beasts. And the many friends and family he cared about. Before they discussed the topic of returning, Linley hadn't felt anything, but now that Delia raised it, Linley actually suddenly felt as though a pressing fire was burning in his heart, surging and charging through his emotions and filling his chest with ardor. Right. It is time to return to the Yulan continent to have a look. After so many years. I wonder how Boss Yale is doing. And Wharton and the others. Sasha and Taylor, those two, I wonder how they are doing. Linley was filled with eagerness. Right. Let's go back together. Delia, seeing that Linley had agreed, couldn't help but feel overjoyed. As a mother, the care and concern she felt for her children came from the deepest recesses of her heart. I wonder how my elder brother is doing. Linley also remembered Dixie. Back then, when he had just entered the Ernst Institute, Dixie had been proclaimed its #1 genius. But afterwards, due to Linley learning from the Straight Chisel School of Sculpting, Linley's spiritual energy had rapidly improved, allowing him to make constant breakthroughs until he had finally surpassed Dixie. It has been a long time since BB's been back as well. Now that he's returning, let's have him accompany us on a trip to the Yulan continent. Linley said eagerly. To tell the truth, up till now, I remain quite curious as to what the necropolis of the gods within the Yulan continent holds. This time, we can take a look. After having trained for so long, Linley no longer felt too much interest in the necropolis of the gods, but he was still curious, after all. He still clearly remembered how, that year, Olivier and the others had risked their lives in adventuring through the necropolis of the gods. But of course, to the current Linley, the necropolis of the gods no longer posed much of a challenge. The necropolis of the gods. Delia sighed. You spent 10 full years on that trip to the necropolis of the gods. I was worrying about you the entire time in Dragon Blood Castle. Hearing this, Linley felt rather ashamed of himself. Boss. BB's voice suddenly rang out from afar. BB arrived. Come, let's go. Linley immediately headed with Delia towards the outside. Once Linley and Delia reached the outside, they discovered that Beirut, Wade, Ina, and the others were already there waiting. BB and Nissa were warmly chatting with Beirut and Ina. Seeing Linley walk over, BB immediately walked towards him and laughed, Boss, long time no see. As he spoke, he gave Linley a firm hug. Linley just grinned. How was your trip to the Jade Float continent? What do you think? BB quirked his lips. Linley couldn't help but look at him in puzzlement. That Salomon hurriedly apologized, of course. Humph, fortunately, he knew to act. If it hadn't been for that, humph. Humph. BB let out 2 snorts, and Linley couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. It seemed as though Salomon cared about his younger sister as well, and so had been rather meek in his attitude. In reality, after Salomon had seen Linley's performance in the Scryer recording, and after Nissa had let him know about the relationship BB had with the Lord Prefect of Indigo Prefecture, Lord Beirut, how could he dare to have a poor attitude? Haha, everyone, let's chat inside. Beirut laughed. While walking towards the inner halls, Linley quietly discussed with Bibi, Delia and I have come to an agreement that we are planning to travel to the Yulan continent. We've been in the infernal realm for so many years, but have never gone back. Do you want to go back with us? Bibi's eyes lit up upon hearing this. Yes, of course, yes. Bibi immediately sent mentally. Boss, let me discuss this with Nissa. She'll definitely agree. Everyone sat down in the main hall. Some servants walked over, carrying all sorts of fine delicacies and offering them. Linley said directly, Lord Beirut, we've been in the infernal realm for so long, Bibi and I have decided that we are planning to return to the Yulan continent. Returning to the Yulan continent? I'm going too. I'm going as well. Wade and Ina simultaneously called out. Beirut let out a surprised sound, but then laughed and nodded. Makes sense. It has indeed been quite some time since you came to the infernal realm. If you want to return to the Yulan continent, you need to be transported back through the Iron Knife Gorge of our Blood-Rige continent. Linley knew that there were teleportation portals scattered throughout the 5 continents and 2 seas of the infernal realm. But the price of each trip through these portals was very high. Lord Beirut, how much is the transport fee? Linley asked. Generally speaking, moving between the higher planes or divine planes isn't as expensive. But moving from the higher planes or divine planes to material planes, now that is exceedingly costly. From material planes to the higher planes or divine planes, however, is free. Beirut explained. Linley understood this as well. He knew that it was expensive, but how expensive, exactly? I don't know if I have enough money on me. Linley was rather nervous. Beirut laughed. But when you go for your trip, as long as you show this medallion, you will be able to use the teleportation portals for free. With a wave of his hand, Beirut pulled out a blood-red medallion which emanated a heart-stopping aura. Linley and the others looked at it. Teleport for free. Bibi's eyes lit up. Grandpa, give it to us as a gift. Hey, I'm just loaning this to you for a single use. Beirut said hurriedly. This medallion was given to me by the sovereign himself. In the past, when I casually roamed throughout the countless planes, I relied on this toy. Otherwise, no matter how much money I might have, I wouldn't be able to afford all those teleportations. I'm only giving it to you for a single use. After you use it, you have to return it to me. In the future, if you need it again, I can loan it to you again. Bibi couldn't help but pout. Clearly, he was unhappy at how stingy his grandfather was. Thank you, Lord Beirut. Linley said hurriedly. Ha, Beirut laughed. Once you reach the Yulan continent, if there's anything you need, feel free to come to the Forest of Darkness to look for me. My clone has remained in the Forest of Darkness this entire time. Clone. Linley was surprised. Beirut laughed and nodded. Linley couldn't help but feel rather surprised, because the Beirut he had met in the Yulan continent looked absolutely identical to this one, in both aura and clothing. Was the Beirut which he had met the person in front of him now, or the clone that was currently in the Forest of Darkness? I'm giving this medallion to you. Don't lose it. Beirut said solemnly, then tossed it to Bibi. Bibi caught it. Don't worry. How can I lose it? On this trip back to the Yulan continent, Linley's family of 3 and Bibi's family of 3 headed out together. On the second day after they acquired the medallion, Linley's group of 6 headed directly towards Iron Knife Gorge. Iron Knife Gorge. The teleportation formation for the Blood-Rige continent was located here. Linley's group flew over, and saw Iron Knife Gorge from far away. Iron Knife Gorge was an extremely easy to recognize landmark. But of course, what sealed its status was the large number of patrolling Blood-Rige soldiers which surrounded the area. Newcomers, halt! The Blood-Rige soldiers called out loudly. Linley's group immediately landed, and the leader of the Blood-Rige soldiers, a man with short, golden, metallic-looking hair swept Linley's group with his icy gaze, then barked, "Why have you come to Iron Knife Gorge? We are going to return to a material plane through the teleportation portal," Linley said. The golden-haired man couldn't help but be surprised. Quite a few people passed through the portal to the other higher planes and divine planes, since the price was much cheaper, but returning to a material plane? The price was terrifyingly high. "Oh. Then come with me." The golden-haired man led the way forward. Linley's group of 6 immediately followed after the Blood Ridge soldier, heading deeper into Iron Knife Gorge. Moments later, Linley's group arrived at the castle situated at the peak of Iron Knife Gorge, where the teleportation array was located. The magic formation which formed the teleportation portal was identical to the one Linley had seen when he had arrived in the infernal realm. "There's actually 6 of you." There were quite a few Blood Ridge soldiers present. One of them weighed Linley's group with his gaze. 3 high gods, 1 god, 1 demigod, 1 saint. According to the rules, returning to a material plane will cost each high god 1 trillion inkstones, and each high god can bring 10 gods with them. Linley, hearing this, was badly shocked. He finally understood why it was that almost no deities had returned to the Yulan continent, despite the passage of so many years. This price was too extravagant. 1 trillion inkstones, that was most likely the entire net worth of most 7-star fiends. There was no way an ordinary high god could possibly afford it. So in total, you need to pay 3 trilli. The Blood Ridge warrior only finished half his sentence before seeing the medallion in Bibi's hands. "Hurry up and activate the transportation magic array," Bibi said calmly. "Yes." The surrounding Blood Ridge soldiers, seeing the medallion, instantly stood up ramrod straight, then quickly flew to the various parts of the array, starting to activate it. Suddenly, one of them turned to look at the group. "Milords, where are you heading to?" "The Yulan continent plane," Linley said. Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 5, Back to the Yulan continent. A cold, desolate wind swept across the world, carrying countless shards of ice and snow and hurling them randomly about. Within this icy world, multiple icebergs rose into the skies. After countless years of being carved by the freezing wind, the icebergs had become completely smooth. If one stared into the surface of the icebergs, one could even see one's reflections. Within one of the tall icebergs, 11 mystical hexagram-shaped magic formations were set here, and next to them, not far away, was a house of ice. Currently, an old man with a white beard and white robes was walking out from within the house of ice, his blue eyes sweeping through the surrounding area. It's so rare to encounter someone here in the Arctic ice cap. In recent years, the saints that have come here to the Arctic ice cap are fewer and fewer in number. It seems I should go on a trip and roam the Yulan continent as well. This person was Hodan, the planar overseer of the Yulan plain. Just as Hodan was preparing to fly away, suddenly, Hodan couldn't help but turn and look. He saw that one of the 11 magic arrays suddenly began to glow with light. Rays of light rose into the heavens in an eye-catching manner, seeming so illusory and dreamlike. Hodan couldn't help but be greatly shocked. The infernal realm. Someone is coming from the infernal realm back to the Yulan plane, a material plane. Hodan knew exactly how astonishing the teleportation fee was. Even most 7-star fiends probably wouldn't be willing to pay for such a trip. Originally, his clan's forces had sent out a group of people led by Sadista. Amongst that group, Sadista was the only high god present. Because of the cost of the teleportation fee, and how expensive it was to teleport a high god, a certain number of gods and demigods who teleported alongside the high god would be permitted to come for free. That time, when his clan had sent Sadista and the others, they had spent 1 trillion inkstones. I wonder which wealthy, extravagant person it is. Hodan wondered to himself. He unconsciously bowed from the waist. How would Hodan dare to be disrespectful to a figure who came from the infernal realm to the Yulan plane? Although Hodan bowed, he still looked carefully into the magic array. He wanted very much to know who this person was. Blurry rays of light formed, slowly coalescing into 6 figures. The 6 figures solidified, and the light of the array faded away. Linley. Hodan stared with disbelief at the 6 figures before him. Hodan, it's been nearly 2,000 years since I saw you. You look the same as always. Linley laughed calmly. Hodan swept Linley's group with his gaze, shock in his heart. There are 3 amongst these 6 whom I cannot sense the auras of at all. There's actually 3 of them who are Highgods. Based on the teleportation fee, they spent 3 trillion inkstones. Hodan was terrified by this figure. Linley's only been in the infernal realm for 2 millennia. How did he become so powerful? More than 2 centuries ago, the Rainales clan and the rest of the 8 great clans had ceased their struggle against the 4 divine beasts clan. But Hodan was just a minor figure of the Rainales clan, and was assigned here as the planar overseer. He didn't know too much regarding the situation of the clan in the infernal realm. Naturally, he didn't understand what sort of status Linley now had. If he knew that Linley was an elder of the Azure Dragon clan, Hodan probably would have been stunned. Lord Linley, you, on the other hand, are far more powerful than before. Hodan was very respectful. He was just a god, how would he dare to be anything but respectful? Linley turned to look at the endless world of ice and snow. The vast world was frozen and desolate, but Linley felt warmth in his heart. Because this was his home. Wait, this is the Arctic ice cap. Linley clearly was rather excited. The Arctic ice cap of the Yulan plain. The Yulan plain, my homeland. After 2,000 years, I've finally returned. Finally returned, haha. Linley was so excited that he couldn't help but laugh loudly. Delia's eyes were moist as well. She was weeping from joy. We're back. I wonder how my Liang clan is doing. If my older brother is doing well or not. Delia was incomparably excited. In the infernal realm, nearly 2,000 years of time had passed. But the longer they had stayed in the infernal realm, the more they had longed for their homeland. So this is father's homeland. Wade looked everywhere, also quite curious. Not even close. The Yulan continent is to the south. Linley laughed. Come. Let's go to the Yulan continent. Hodan, we'll leave now. Laughing, Linley summoned a surge of Earth-type divine power, sweeping them all up to fly away alongside him at high speed, departing from the Arctic ice cap and flying towards the Yulan continent. As for Hodan, he stared into the distance as Linley left. That year in the past, I kept on feeling as though Linley was a genius. But who would have imagined, in less than 2,000 years, he would have returned from the infernal realm? Terrifying. Terrifying. To be able to return from the infernal realm was a proof of power. How could ordinary Highgods possess a fortune of 1 trillion inkstones? Flying was restricted and cumbersome in the infernal realm. Upon returning to a material realm, Linley felt his flying speed rise dramatically, and he was now 10 times faster than when he had been in the infernal realm. He used his divine earth power to wrap everyone up, so as to help Ina, Wade, and the others move more rapidly as well. After flying a short period of time, Linley saw, off in the distance, the sinuous, coiling northern shorelines off the North Sea. Boss, we're at the Yulan continent. BB called out excitedly. So this is the Yulan continent. Ina looked around curiously. Linley and Delia's faces were slightly reddened. Clearly, both were very excited. It had been 2,000 years since they had left, after all. Delia turned to look towards Linley. Linley, where should we go first? To the Forest of Darkness? Or to Dragonblood Castle? Linley let out a low sigh. It's been so many years since I paid my respects to father. Let's go to Wushan Township. For some reason, Linley missed Wushan Township the most. Perhaps it was because that was where his roots were. His youth had been spent there. That was where he had met Grandpa Douring. And that was where he had met Bibi. Wushan Township. Right. Let's go to Wushan Township. Bibi said as well. I was born in Wushan Township. Bibi turned, explaining to Ina and Nissa. Wushan Township was a place of tremendous meaning for both Linley and Bibi. That was the start of their life. Right. To Wushan Township. I want to see it. Ina said jubilantly. Wushan Township is probably covered with magical beasts. Linley sighed. After nearly 2,000 years, I wonder what it has become like. 2,000 years was too long a period of time, after all. It was enough for many things to occur. Father, I want to see our ancestral manor as well. Wade was very eager as well. Then, let's go. Linley immediately led everyone directly to the western side of the mountain range of magical beasts, pressing forward towards Wushan Township at a fast pace. Given that he was now a Highgod, he flew hundreds of times faster than in the past, when he was a saint. Flying through this material plane, where the restrictive forces were much weaker, Linley quickly arrived at the mountain range of magical beasts. When I was young, when I traveled from the Holy Union to the O'Brien Empire, I spent more than half a year. But now, from the North Sea to here, I only spent as much time as is needed to drink a cup of water. Oh, and there's Wushan Township. Just as Linley finished his words, he arrived in the air above Wushan Township. Emerging from the mountains. But in the air above Wushan Township, Linley's group came to a pause, puzzled. Uncle, you said there must be many magical beasts here. But when we flew over here from the mountains, we saw many buildings and many people. Ina didn't understand. Also, is this Wushan Township? Why is it so densely populated? There has to be tens of thousands of people here. Right. This is the former Wushan Township. Linley was certain about this. As a Highgod, how could he be mistaken about the geography of such a place? Look, that's MT Wushan over there. MT Wushan is still there. So this is Wushan Township. Linley pointed to the east, where there was indeed a large mountain. Although nearly 2,000 years had passed, MT Wushan hadn't changed much. The western side of Wushan Township had, however. Because there was an extremely beautiful educational institute built here, with an astonishing number of people. This institute, in terms of size, was far larger than the former Wushan Township. What's going on here? Linley was completely confused. Delia was puzzled as well. In the past, this place should have been covered with magical beasts. We just flew past the mountain range of magical beasts. We saw so many buildings on the way over. Look, there are humans in other places nearby as well, but no magical beasts. After that Apocalypse Day, the Holy Union and the Dark Alliance had much of their territory taken over by magical beasts. However, after nearly 2,000 years, this area was actually reclaimed by humanity. 2,000 years. Too many things have occurred. Linley sighed. Come. Let's go to my ancestral manor. As Linley spoke, he flew forward. Although Linley's group of 6 flew through the air, the people below didn't notice them at all, partially because they were too high up, and also because Linley used elemental energy to form a cloud around them. Linley slowly flew forward while looking down below carefully. Linley's vision was extremely good. And he instantly found the centermost location of the institute, his ancestral manor. My ancestral manor remains standing. Linley was surprised. Boss, the ancestral manor is actually in perfect shape. In fact, it seems to be in much better shape than it was in the past. Bibi said in surprise as well. The other areas in this enormous institute were newly constructed, but Linley's former ancestral manor had been preserved and even renovated. Although it had been only 2 millennia, due to long-term caretaking, it wasn't damaged in the slightest. Linley and Bibi, seeing it, couldn't help but feel excited. They had so many beautiful memories from this place. "Let's go down," Linley said softly. And then, with a swish sound, their 6 shadows flashed through the skies, landing directly within the courtyard of the ancestral manor. Because they were too fast, they dropped down in less than the twinkling of an eye from the skies. There was no way ordinary people could possibly catch Linley's movements with their eyes. Within the manor. "Everything is fine, everything is fine." Linley stood there in the courtyard, looking around carefully. Suddenly, he saw that there was a chair in the courtyard. His eyes instantly turned red. "This chair is still." Linley couldn't believe it. Staring at the chair, Linley's memories returned, to when his father, Hogg, had often reclined on this chair, reading books. Linley took a deep breath. He could instantly tell that the chair had been recreated in that style. The original chair, after 2,000 years, had probably rotted away long ago. "Wait, this is the chair which your grandfather often sat in." Linley pointed towards the chair as he spoke. "And there, that place. I used to study and learn culture from your grandfather there." Linley still remembered how, every day, he intensively flipped through books and studied, and often had to go through Hogg's strict tests. "Wow," Wade stared, wide-eyed, at every location. "This is the place where I used to sleep. Bibi lived with me as well." Linley pointed to a nearby room. Bibi couldn't help but grin as well. "Come. In the backyard is the ancestral hall of our clan." In the past, Bibi was born in a courtyard near the ancestral hall. Linley's face was all smiles, and Bibi laughed as well. "That year, the boss seduced me by cooking ducks and wild hares for me. Poor me. I was so young and naive back then." Linley and Bibi laughed as they headed towards the inner courtyard. As they walked through the ancestral manor, Linley and Bibi's hearts were filled with warmth. Right at this moment. "Eh? Someone is coming." Linley, Bibi, and the others moved away, instantly scurrying into the rear courtyard. Kriak! The door to the ancestral manor swung open. An old man led dozens of youngsters and youths into this room. "Everyone, this is the place. It was here that the mighty genius Grand Master Sculptor, also a genius warrior Magus double expert, also the founding emperor of the Barak Empire, and also the master of the sacred place Dragon Blood Castle, used to live in his youth. The legendary deity, Linley Barak. Be careful. You are only allowed to look, not to touch." The old man explained. This room was the place where Grandmaster Linley used to live. "Wow, Grandmaster Linley used to live here. It'd be so awesome if I could go sleep there as well." A youth said softly, his eyes bright. "Humph." The old man couldn't help but frown as he swept these students with his gaze. "Pay attention. This is the ancestral manor of Grandmaster Linley. During your studies here, this will be the only chance you have to come visit. In the future, you won't have another chance. Enough. Let's go to the study now. That's the place where Grandmaster Linley used to read when he was young." Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 6, After 2,000 years, even seas can become plains. Within the rear courtyard of the ancestral manor, Linley listened to the voice coming from the front, rather amazed. "Boss." Bibi laughed as he looked at Linley, then gave him a big thumbs up. Wade and Ina looked worshipfully towards Linley. Ina even repeated, "The mighty genius Grandmaster Sculptor, also a genius warrior Magus double expert, also the founding emperor of the Barak Empire, and also the master of the sacred place Dragon Blood Castle, the legendary deity, Linley Barak. Uncle, you have so many titles. You are amazing. There's one missing, actually." The Dragon Blood Warrior of the Supreme Warrior clans. BB grinned. Linley could only laugh. Those visiting students in the front courtyard only viewed some areas in the front, and then left in a group. Clearly, the rear courtyard of the ancestral manor was not open to these students. It made sense, the rear courtyard had always been in a state of disrepair. Only the ancestral hall had always remained protected. But how could these ordinary students be allowed to view the ancestral hall? Of course, the true ancestral hall of the Barrack clan had already been moved to Dragonblood Castle, and so there wasn't anything within the ancestral hall in this ancestral manor. Just now, I believe they mentioned the words, Sacred Place and Dragonblood Castle. So Dragonblood Castle has become a sacred place. Linley let out a moved sigh. Delia chuckled, it has quite a few deities. If it isn't a sacred place, what is it? Father. Ina said to Bibi. Where were you born? Laughing, Bibi led Ina and Nissa to the side, while Linley headed towards the ancestral hall, with Delia and Wade following him as he pushed open the door to the hall and went into it. Kriayak. The door opened, and Linley carefully inspected the ancestral hall. Compared to the past, the ancestral hall was virtually unchanged. Clearly, it had been maintained very well. But of course, the many spirit tablets that had been placed here had been moved long ago to Dragonblood Castle. The counter was completely empty. Linley stared at the ancestral hall. His mind thought back to the first time his father, Hog, had introduced the background of their Barrack clan. The 4 supreme warriors actually represent 4 ancient clans. Our Barrack clan is the ancient clan which contains the exalted bloodline of the Dragon Blood Warriors. In the ancestral hall, his father had explained these things to him excitedly. This seemed to have happened just yesterday. But now, his father was dead. Father, do you know? I've gone to the infernal realm, and met with our clan leader, Barrack, Ryan, Hazard, and the other ancestors of the clan as well. They are all doing very well, very well. Linley felt sourness in his heart. His father had always hoped for his clan to return to glory. His clan had indeed flourished, but his father would never be able to see it again. Wade and Delia stood there quietly, just watching, not daring to disturb Linley. Linley suddenly frowned and turned. Someone is coming. Who are you people? A voice rang out from not too far away. Let's go take a look. Linley, Wade, and Delia all walked outside. By the time they reached the outside, they saw that a middle-aged man dressed in grey magus robes was staring at Bibi, Nissa, and Ina. When Linley's group walked out, the middle-aged man said, stunned, there's actually 6 of you. This middle-aged man was the chancellor of this institute, the saint-level expert, Hamelin Hamulin. Chancellor Hamelin was already a peak saint. While he just so happened to walk past the courtyard, he sensed the presence of outsiders within the ancestral hall. Normally, it was forbidden for outsiders to enter this hall, and so Hamelin naturally shouted at them. Actually, Hamelin had only sensed Ina's presence, he hadn't sensed the other 5. He had thought there was only 1 person present. Who would have imagined that there were actually 6? Clearly, the other 5 were more powerful than him. Who are you? Linley looked at him. Hamelin said composedly, this is a core area of my Linley Institute. How did you come in? As for me, I am this institute's chancellor, Hamelin. Hey, what did you say this institute is called? Bibi immediately said. Linley was badly startled upon hearing this. It seemed as though this Hamelin had just said the words, Linley Institute. Hamelin, puzzled, looked at these 6. What? Can it be that you've never even heard of the Linley Institute, one of the 3 great institutes of the continent? Can it be that you didn't see the sculpture of Grandmaster Linley which lies right past the main gates to our institute? This was common knowledge, but the looks on the faces of Linley's group did indeed make Hamelin feel puzzled. Linley Institute. Wade's eyes widened, and he turned to look at Linley. Father, did you hear that? The Linley Institute. Linley was speechless. Although Hamelin had seen the sculpture of Linley, first of all, the sculpture wasn't at the Grand Master level of accuracy, and second of all, compared to when he was a saint, Linley's aura had completely changed. Thus, Hamelin didn't make any mental connection at all between the person in front of him and the legend of the continent, Linley. We just came for a look. Linley laughed calmly. Enough. We will leave now. Linley spread out his divine earth power, including Ina and Wade within it. An earthen yellow light flashed, and Linley's group of 6 disappeared into the horizon. This speed. Hamelin stared, stupefied. He's far faster than even my teacher, and Teacher Reynolds is a deity-level expert. Who on earth are these people? The Barak Empire had existed for nearly 2,000 years now, and the holiest site in the empire was Dragonblood Castle. The successive generations of emperors, upon giving up the throne, almost all moved to live here at Dragonblood Castle. Dragonblood Castle had quite a few deities, and also quite a few saint-level magical beasts who guarded it. Nobody dared to act wildly in Dragonblood Castle. Dragonblood Castle had expanded long ago. By now, it was many times larger than it had been in the past. The adamantine garden of Dragonblood Castle was where Warden lived. Currently, in a grassy area of the adamantine garden, 2 young-looking men were seated in the meditative position, facing each other while drinking wine and chatting. Taylor, what? You don't want another woman? Uncle Warden, I'm tired. The thick-eyebrowed, muscular youth was Tyler. Although nearly 2,000 years had passed, Taylor's appearance had barely changed compared to the past. Right now, Taylor was sighing. Uncle Warden, we have eternal life, but our spouses? We have to just watch as our spouses age, then die. This sort of feeling is too painful. In the past 2 millennia, Taylor had taken 2 women as his wives in succession. But these 2 wives had both died of old age, filling Taylor with the utmost of pain. Alas, Warden let out a low sigh as well. I still remember how, that year, my big brother, for the sake of letting me marry Nina, did everything he could, even going so far as to duel Olivier in the arena. After a few centuries, even Nina was unable to resist the flow of time, and it's been nearly 2,000 years since my big brother went to the infernal realm. Nina died more than a millennium ago. Warden laughed at himself. Sometimes, eternal life is a painful thing. Only upon becoming a saint would one possess eternal life. But becoming a saint required talent and luck. To most commoners, it was too difficult. Gates and the others were lucky. Warden let out a sigh. Of the 5 Barker brothers, Barker and Gates had married Rebecca and her sister, both of whom had very pure souls and thus were extremely suited and talented for training in necromantic magic. After 100 or so years, they had reached the saint level. Only when both members in a couple were both in possession of eternal lifespan would things be ideal. If only one side possessed an eternal lifespan, then the result would be watching the other slowly age and die. This was indeed agonizing. Uncle Warden, as I see it, we should go to the infernal realm sometime as well. Taylor said. Go to the infernal realm. Warden nodded slightly. In the Yulan plain, although we have a great enmity against the Odin Empire, there's nothing we can do. It can be said that there is nothing holding us here. After some more time passes, let's go visit the infernal realm. It has been a long time since I've seen Big Bro. I truly wish to see him. I want to see Father as well. Taylor said softly. Warden. Taylor. A voice echoed in the minds of Warden and Taylor. Warden and Taylor seemed to have both been struck by lightning, staring at each other in disbelief. At the same time, they too sensed a powerful aura spreading out from the war training grounds in the front courtyard of Dragonblood Castle. Although this aura was powerful, it had such a familiar feeling to it. This was Linley's aura. Swoosh. Swoosh. Wharton and Taylor simultaneously transformed into streaks of lightning, flying out at high speed. Dragonblood Castle. The war training grounds. Linley's group of 6 was standing here. Linley was actively emanating his aura while greeting one familiar figure after another through his divine sense. However, when he used his divine sense to investigate, Linley discovered that many familiar figures of the past had disappeared, such as Grandpa Hyrie, Uncle Hillman, Wharton's wife Nina, Jen. Are they all dead? Linley wondered to himself. Just because they weren't at Dragonblood Castle didn't necessarily mean that they were dead. But Linley, too, understood that the lifespan of normal humans who didn't reach the saint level would generally reach at most 3 or 4 centuries. 5 centuries was the utmost limit. Only by reaching the saint level would one possess eternal life. One figure after another flew over at high speed from places throughout Dragonblood Castle. Father! A deep voice rang out. Linley's eyes lit up. It was Taylor. Big bro. It was Wharton. Lord Linley. The incredibly muscular Barker. A large group of people flew over at high speed, and in an instant, nearly 100 had gathered here in the training grounds. Linley only recognized less than half of these people, and didn't recognize the majority. However, upon seeing all those familiar faces, Linley couldn't help but feel excited. These were his comrades, his friends, his family. Big bro. Wharton immediately gave Linley a tight, vicious bear hug. Wharton. Linley hugged his little brother as well, unable to refrain from feeling regretful. Master. Linley turned to look. There was a man dressed in a long black robe. It was the transformed Haru. Haru was staring at Linley in excitement as well. So many years had gone by. As a king amongst magical beasts, Haru felt extremely grateful towards Linley for what he had given him. Wharton and Linley released each other. Wharton was completely unable to suppress his excitement. Big bro, I really didn't expect you'd be back. We were just talking about going to the infernal realm to look for you. Big bro, there are many people here you don't recognize, right? Let me introduce them. This is Arnold's son. Wharton. In one breath, introduced more than 10 important people. These people all stared at Linley, their eyes filled with shock, awe, and veneration. It was like they were staring at a titan from Legends. Wade, come, meet your uncle. Also, this is your older brother, Taylor. Linley was incomparably overjoyed right now. Right at this moment. Third bro. A voice suddenly rang out from behind. Linley turned to look. It was a demigod, dressed in a long black robe. Those intelligent eyes looked the same as they always had, only they appeared slightly older than before. This was the man who had been one of Linley's closest friends, his 4th bro Reynolds. 4th bro. Linley immediately went to welcome him, tightly embracing his 4th bro, Reynolds. 3rd bro. Reynolds couldn't help but shed tears as well. They hadn't met for nearly 2,000 years. He had thought that they would never be able to meet again. Now that they saw each other, how could he not feel excited? 3rd bro, it's been so many years. Reynolds was so excited, his entire body was trembling. Right. Linley nodded repeatedly as well. Linley immediately thought of Yale and George. He hurriedly asked, right, 4th bro, where's the boss and 2nd bro? How are the 2 of them? Linley had a hint of hope in his heart. After all, Yale and George were very talented as well. Maybe they had reached the saint level as well. The chance was low, but Linley held out hope in his heart. All dead. Reynolds' voice sank. Linley was stunned. Dead, Linley sighed. Actually, Linley had mentally prepared himself in advance for this return. After all, he hadn't come back in nearly 2,000 years. Anyone not at the saint level would age and die, just from the passage of time. Becoming a saint was extremely hard, after all. In the past, it was only because Delia had received Beirut's gift, that divine spark, that she was able to become a saint and then a deity. In truth, only a saint should have been able to fuse with the divine spark. As for those who were not yet saints, divine sparks weren't of much use. The reason why Delia's training speed had risen so rapidly didn't have anything to do with the divine spark itself. In truth, it was due to some special materials which coated that divine spark. Because that divine spark was no ordinary divine spark. It must be understood that wind-type divine sparks should emanate a faint green aura. But on the day of the wedding, the divine spark which Delia received had no color at all. It was very ordinary. Actually, that divine spark was something which Beirut had refined and reforged after using up quite a few treasures. The core of that spark was a divine spark, but the outside layer was of some precious materials which allowed Delia to more easily sense elemental essences. And thus, she was able to quickly rise in power. However, they didn't die of age. Reynolds said in a low voice. Linley was stunned. What? Big bro, it's best for us to go inside to talk about this. Wharton said hurriedly. Linley stared at Reynolds, who let out a sigh as well. Third bro, let's go into the hall to slowly discuss this. Linley felt that things were a bit strange, but he tamped down his disquiet and questions, following Reynolds and Wharton into the castle, to the hall for discussing major events. Only 20 or so people actually entered the hall. The other juniors were stopped and kept outside. Within the great hall, Linley's family, Beebe's family, Wharton, Taylor, Sasha, Zisler, and the Barker brothers were all present. Fourth bro, what happened, exactly? You said the boss and second bro didn't die normal deaths. Linley couldn't help but speak out. Right. Reynolds said in a low voice, third bro, let us finish. Don't grow impatient. You have to be calm. Hurry up. Linley couldn't endure any longer. Reynolds nodded. Third bro. At present, in the Yulan continent, there are only two empires remaining. One is the Barak Empire, while the other is the Odin Empire. As for the land west of the mountain range of magical beasts, where the Holy Union and the Dark Alliance used to rule, that has devolved into various duchies and kingdoms that aren't worth mentioning. Odin Empire. Linley frowned. Right. The former O'Brien Empire, Yulan Empire, Rhine Empire, and Rohald Empire, as well as the Great Plains of the Far East, have all been unified into the Odin Empire. Reynolds said. Linley couldn't help but feel startled. This Odin Empire took up more than half of the entire Yulan continent. Actually, not long after you left, Lord Beirut sent us a message through his divine sense, informing all deities of some information. After that, those deities gave up their plans of entering the necropolis of the gods and left to the higher planes or divine planes. Reynolds said slowly. As for the Yulan Empire and the O'Brien Empire, they were restored. Second bro, George, became a pillar and an important official of the Yulan Empire, while Boss Yale worked hard for the Dawson conglomerate. With our help, the Dawson conglomerate truly absorbed the other two major trading unions, become the number one trading union of the Yulan continent. Linley just listened quietly. But, our calm and peaceful lives lasted for just 2 centuries. And then, a person appeared. Reynolds said in a low voice, his name is Odin. In just a single short year, he unified the various other empires, and even wanted to annihilate our Barak Empire. But when he attacked, fortunately, Lord Beirut appeared and stopped him with a rebuke. Ever since then, he's not invaded so much as a single inch of the territory of our Barak Empire. Based on the information we received from Lord Beirut, this Odin was also one of the 5 kings of Gabados, and was nicknamed the Vile King. Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 7, Parting Words. One of the 5 kings. Linley couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Each of the 5 kings of the Gabados planar prison was a supreme expert. Bluefire was one of the 5 kings. Since Odin was titled the Vile King, on par with Bluefire, then Odin's power was definitely at an astonishing level as well. The deaths of the boss and of second bro have to do with him. Linley couldn't help but ask. Yes, third bro. You know that our second bro, George, was very talented in magic. In addition, he was fairly diligent in his training. A century after you left, he reached the saint level. He should have had eternal life, but... Reynolds' face turned dark. Clearly, this filled his heart with boundless rage. However, Reynolds forced it down, so that he could continue to speak. The first time Odin attacked, he struck at the imperial capital of the Yulan Empire. With just a flip of his hand, that Odin destroyed half of the imperial capital. In addition, he had a group of subordinates, all of whom were deities. Odin issued an order. Everyone within the imperial capital at or above the saint level was to be killed. No one was to be spared. Second bro, George, was killed there. Reynolds continued to speak, but as he did, his tears began to fall. Although Linley had mentally prepared himself, he still felt his head go dizzy. He still clearly remembered how of the 4 brothers, George was amiable, good-tempered, and yet always willing to share in the shouldering of any burdens. Second bro died, just like that. Linley couldn't believe it. George, who had always had such distant, lofty goals, had died. How could Linley swallow his rage, after his close friend had been killed like this? Odin must die. Linley's face was like iron. Big bro. Wharton said hurriedly. Third bro. Reynolds hurriedly called out as well. Reynolds, you said, a trembling voice rang out. Delia, standing next to Linley, stared at Reynolds nervously, her eyes filled with fear and worry. You said that everyone at or above the saint level in the imperial capital was killed. What about my elder brother? How is my elder brother? In the Leon clan, aside from Delia, the only person to reach the saint level was Dixie. Over the course of 2,000 years, those previous family members of hers had turned to dust long ago. Delia truly hoped to see her elder brother, Dixie, on this return. The genius elder brother who had always taken care of her. Dixie. Reynolds was stunned. Right, my brother. Is my brother still alive? Delia's entire body was trembling. Delia, Linley couldn't help but take Delia's hand in his own. He could clearly sense how her hand was shaking. Dixie is dead. Wharton said. The 10 saints who were at the imperial capital were all killed, and Dixie was one of them. Odin and his subordinates were too vicious, and he even had Highgod serving him. There was no way such a powerful force could be resisted at all. How could any saints flee? Delia's face instantly turned pale. My brother died. Delia lowered her head, 2 streams of clear tears falling down her face. Delia. Linley said hurriedly. Delia suddenly opened her eyes, grinding her teeth. Odin. I must kill him. Delia turned to look at Linley. Linley, I must kill him, I must. We must. We must. Linley felt his own killing intent surge as well. No, don't. Taylor was absolutely frantic. Mother, father, don't go. This Odin is truly too powerful. Back then, Odin even attacked Dragonblood Castle. It took Lord Beirut making an appearance to stop him. Lord Beirut said, that even in the higher planes, this Odin would be considered a top-tier expert. Right. Reynolds said frantically as well. Third bro, no matter what, don't put yourself at risk. I remember Lord Beirut said something about a 7-star fiend. That this Odin could be considered a 7-star fiend. Sasha said hurriedly as well. It was evident that they clearly remembered the scene of how Lord Beirut had appeared when Odin had attacked. They, too, were filled with the utmost of hatred towards Odin, but Lord Beirut had solemnly warned them of how powerful this Odin was, and that they would die if they fought him. 7-star Fiend. Linley's gaze flashed with cold light. The nearby BB said angrily, even if he is an Azura, he will still die. Reynolds and the others didn't understand the meaning of this. They didn't understand what the terms 7-star Fiend and Azura entailed. Right. Boss Yale. Linley suddenly thought of Yale. Yale was a member of the Dawson conglomerate. Odin had unified an empire, but what did Yale have to do with that? Third bro, first calm down. Don't act rashly out of anger. Reynolds said hurriedly. As Reynolds and Wharton saw it, their biggest concern was that Linley would go insane and go try and make trouble for Odin. As they saw it, although Linley was a genius, he had only trained for 2 millennia, while that Odin was someone who was far more monstrously powerful than even the now deceased Adkins. Fine. I won't act impetuously. Speak, hurry. Although Linley said these words, rage was blazing within his chest. The death of second bro as well as that of Delia's elder brother, they had to be avenged. Fine. I'll speak. Reynolds shut his eyes. He took a deep breath before opening them again, but tears began to uncontrollably appear within them nonetheless. When Boss Yale was young, he didn't work hard in his training, and he was also the least talented of us 4 brothers, and so he became stuck as an 8th-rank magus. However, this didn't prevent his becoming as the chairman of the conglomerate. Linley nodded slightly. He remembered that Yale had once said that he dreamed of becoming the chairman of the Dawson conglomerate and swallowing up the other 2 trading guilds, becoming the single largest trading guild of the entire Yulan continent. That year, although the Yulan Empire and the O'Brien Empire were restored to power, they had too few experts and were too weak. In the entire Yulan continent, only the Barak Empire could be considered a powerhouse. Reynolds said slowly. With our help, the Dawson conglomerate naturally expanded non-stop, moving as easily as a fish does in water. The other 2 trading guilds were squeezed and nibbled down. In the end, they completely collapsed and were swallowed up by the Dawson conglomerate. Boss Yale accomplished his goal and was extremely happy. Myself and second bro, along with Boss Yale, even had a special get-together and celebration for this event. A drifting look was in Reynolds' eyes. That year, the 3 of us celebrated together. We even sighed that it was unfortunate that you, third bro, weren't here. Otherwise, the 4 of us would have been able to have a good get-together. Linley couldn't help but feel a deeply buried part of his heart tremble. It was the deep recesses of his heart, where the love he bore for his brothers lay. When the 3 of us were together, everything was fine. But, after we separated and went about our own business, not long afterwards the vile King Odin appeared. He first showed off his brutal, domineering, unstoppable power by forcefully uniting the various empires into his Odin Empire. Reynolds said in a low voice. But Odin wasn't satisfied with just that. He took a fancy to the Dawson conglomerate. Although the Dawson conglomerate was just a merchant conglomerate, as the largest one in the continent, it had astonishingly great power secreted throughout the continent. Linley's face became ugly to behold. In the past, when the Dawson conglomerate was just one of 3 major trading guilds, it was already very powerful. By the time it swallowed up the other 2, Linley could imagine how formidable the hidden power of the Dawson conglomerate was. One of Odin's clones trains in the Edicts of Death. Reynolds said somberly. He easily took control over several major empires because he was able to spiritually dominate quite a few critical members of the various empires, and so he was able to easily unify the nations. As for Boss Yale, his soul was dominated as well. Linley couldn't help but feel pain in his heart. Boss Yale had been dominated once in the past as well. That time, Linley had rescued Boss Yale, but, this time, he wasn't there. Nobody was there to rescue him. In a short year, with Boss Yale's cooperation, the management structure of the Dawson conglomerate was completely changed and replaced with Odin's people. It can be said, that aside from Boss Yale, not a single member of the Dawson clan remained, out of all the important, high-level members of the Dawson conglomerate. They were all replaced by Odin's men. Reynolds' voice was hoarse. Reynolds suddenly stared at Linley, letting out a grief-stricken laugh. "Third bro, do you know why Odin is known as the Vile King?" Linley was stunned. "Why?" Linley said. "Because he truly is vile. Not only does he have all sorts of evil techniques, he himself is an evil, vile person." Reynolds was unable to control his voice. After the Dawson conglomerate fell under his control, that bastard actually controlled Yale and made him personally kill one member of the Dawson clan after another. These people included Boss Yale's son, his wife, his descendants, his brothers, they all died. And Boss Yale personally killed them all. Linley's heart grew cold. Boss Yale no longer held any more value for him, but he didn't just kill Boss Yale. He let Boss Yale regain his mind and his freedom. Reynolds said in a low voice. That bastard. He has to die." The nearby Ina couldn't help but growl out as well. Linley's face was ashen. When Boss Yale regained his senses, he knew what he had done. Perhaps only an extremely few members of the Dawson clan were still alive, those who were in very distant, remote regions. The central members of the clan, however, Boss Yale's relatives, he had killed them all, sparing none. Boss Yale was in such agony, he went insane. Reynolds' body was trembling slightly. Linley already felt as though countless knives were stabbing into his heart. But that Odin sealed up Boss Yale's mage force, and then bound him and strung him up on a tree in the Odin palace. Reynolds sobbed, his tears pouring forth. When bored, Odin would often go sit beneath the tree, drinking wine and enjoying the services of the palace maid. When he listened to Boss Yale's insane curses, he seemed to rather enjoy it, as though he enjoyed Boss Yale's madness, his despair. Linley felt as though his head was about to explode. Vile. This wasn't just vile. This was utterly perverted. Odin was a pervert. After having stolen away the Dawson conglomerate, which Yale had worked for all his life, he then had Yale kill his own relatives, then gave Yale his mind back. And Odin enjoyed listening to Yale's curses, enjoyed Yale's madness. When I learned this, I frantically hurried to that place. Reynolds said bitterly. Boss Yale barely had any life left in him. Odin was too powerful, he could have killed me with a single finger. So all I could do was secretly use my divine sense to enter Boss Yale's mind and speak with him. By then, Boss Yale's mind was at the point of collapse. I am unable to imagine what sort of mental torment he must have felt during the time he had been hung up there. All I knew was that Boss Yale, ever so graceful and vigorous and carefree, was at the point of collapse. Linley was so angry, he could no longer speak. He just stared at Reynolds. When I sent out my divine sense, Boss Yale reacted, very slightly. But he just repeated the words, "I have sinned. I have sinned." Reynolds' voice trembled. He begged me to kill him. He was hung there and his mage force was sealed, he was unable to kill himself. He wanted me to kill him. To release him from it all. Linley's body shook. I agreed. Reynolds said in a low voice. Boss Yale was already insane. I had never seen him like that before. Before he died, Boss Yale told me that Odin was extremely strong, far more powerful than the last Highgod, Adkins. Afterwards, he said one thing to me, "Fourth bro, no matter what, you and third bro are not to avenge me. Do not try to avenge me." Reynolds' face was covered with tears now. Linley just stood there, stunned. "You and third bro, no matter what, are not to avenge me. Do not try to avenge me. Boss Yale's dying shout seemed to echo in his ears. Boom. Linley's mind was utterly blank, but he felt as though an explosion had gone off within it. Ah. Linley knelt down on the ground, agonized, releasing a growling, agonized cry from his throat. Third bro. Reynolds went to go lift Linley up. He could imagine how agonized Linley was, because when Reynolds had seen Boss Yale and what terrible shape he had been in, Reynolds was utterly agonized as well. He had even killed Yale with his own hands, so as to grant Yale release. Linley, kneeling there on the ground, lifted his head up. His eyes were red, and his entire body was shaking. He growled out, "Odin. I will definitely make him go insane from agony as well. I will make him go hysterical. Make him die." Linley's voice seemed to have been ground out from every single tooth in his mouth. Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 8, Marvelous Treasures. Third bro, calm down. Reynolds immediately shouted. Father. Sasha and Taylor called out in terror as well. They were afraid that after Linley learned of this matter, he would be unable to contain his rage and go attack Odin. Wharton, Reynolds, and the others all knew what it meant to be a peak Highgod expert. This was why, despite Yale dying heartbroken and furious, before his death, he had instructed that Linley and Reynolds were not to avenge him. It wasn't that he, Yale, didn't want revenge. It was that he was afraid that Linley and Reynolds would die because of him as well. Boss, let's go kill him. BB immediately charged outwards. Linley suddenly stretched out his right hand, snatching BB. Staring at him, Linley said, "BB, don't be impetuous." "Right. Don't be rash." Wharton said frantically as well. "BB, you and my brother need to calm down first. If revenge was possible, we would have taken it long ago. But if we aren't able to do so, the end result would just be that our lives are lost as well. It isn't worth it. We have to endure. Endure. Endure my ass." BB roared furiously. "So what if he's a 7-star fiend? Centuries ago, before the boss made his breakthrough, he killed 5 7-star fiends by himself, much less now. Forget 7-star fiend, even if that Odin is an infernal Azura, the boss, and I don't fear him." When Linley had advanced from being a god to a high god, his power had risen by several levels. He now not only had a god spark weapon. He also had sovereign's might to use in the event of any danger. And aside from Linley himself, BB's innate divine ability, God Aider, was a monstrously powerful technique. Although BB wasn't strong in his normal attacks, when executing his supreme, divine ability, his power was comparable to Beirut's. If Linley and BB joined forces, how many people could possibly stop the two of them? What did you say?" Wharton was stunned. "Before making a breakthrough? Killed 5 7-star fiends." Reynolds and everyone else was stunned. Although they didn't know much about what a 7-star fiend truly represented, based on the way Beirut had said it, they all understood that 7-star fiends should stand at the peak of power amongst high gods. "Don't worry. I'm confident in being able to kill Odin," Linley said in a low voice. "If BB and I are incapable of killing Odin, Lord Beirut probably would have warned me about him back when we were in the infernal realm." Beirut knew exactly what had happened back here in the Yulan continent. But Beirut hadn't said anything about it. Linley didn't blame Beirut for Odin having tortured Yale. After all, Beirut couldn't possibly have his divine sense spread out every moment of every day, paying attention to everything. Nor did Linley blame Beirut for not having killed Odin in revenge. The reason he didn't kill Odin was to let me do it myself. A killing look appeared in Linley's eyes. "Third bro, you are confident in being able to kill Odin?" Reynolds looked towards Linley disbelievingly. "Big bro." Wharton was stunned as well, and he looked at Linley in amazed joy. "Completely confident." Linley's voice was like ice. He then turned to look at BB. "BB, This Odin is nicknamed the Vile King. He tormented boss Yale to the point of madness, to the point where life was worse than death. How can I allow this Odin to die so easily? Only when a person was still alive would he feel terror and despair. Once a person died, that person would no longer feel a thing. But how could a bit of fear be enough to cause the blazing embers of rage in Linley's heart to subside? How could it allow Yale's tormented soul to be at peace? Third bro. Reynolds suddenly said loudly. Linley turned to look. Reynolds' face was covered with tears, and in his eyes was an extremely complicated mixture of rage and delight. Third bro, you must avenge the boss, and second bro, you must let their wronged souls, in the Netherworld, find peace. Reynolds had wanted to take revenge for all these years, but he didn't have the ability to do so. He wasn't willing to accept this. But all he could do was hate himself for his inability. What could he do? With the little bit of power he possessed, he would probably die before even reaching Odin. Get revenge. Reynolds stared at Linley, placing his hopes upon Linley's shoulders. Don't worry. Linley suddenly turned to stare at Wharton. Wharton, immediately go make some arrangements. Have all of our intelligence reports on Odin be sent over, including those regarding his subordinates. Have everything sent over. All right. Wharton hurriedly went to make the arrangements. Turning his head, Linley stared at the nearby Delia, whose face was covered in tears as well. In a low voice he said, Delia, don't worry. That Odin will definitely die, and his death will be agonizing. I swear it. The Barak Empire had been founded nearly 2,000 years ago. And so its intelligence agents were now spread throughout the entire Yulan continent. They even know what was going on within the Odin Empire's imperial palace. In the past, the Barak Empire had constantly been collecting intelligence reports regarding the Odin Empire. Now that Linley had given the order, the many intelligence reports were organized, collated, then delivered to Linley's table. In but a single night, Linley made his preparations for vengeance. Odin Empire. The capital city of Ides province. A lavish estate. Within a flower garden, a young noble youth dressed in luxurious robes was resting on a reclining sofa. Although it was a sofa, in reality, it was more like a bed. A beautiful maid was curled up on the bed as well, her clothes half removed, revealing her snowy white skin. As for the noble youth, his head was resting within the maid's bosom. So slow. The noble youth snorted unhappily. Right at this moment, one beautiful young lady after another entered the flower garden, along with a middle-aged man who looked like a housekeeper who barked, "Hurry up! Over there! 5 of you in each line. Stand straight." 25 attractive, slender young women. These 25 young women all stood there in lines, rather nervous. "Your Highness, they are all present." The housekeeper immediately walked over humbly and said in a respectful voice. "Fine." The young noble replied, but his gaze was fixed on the 25 women. A wicked little smile appeared on his face. They are indeed quite young, unlike those old maids of the plainer prison who didn't have any womanly airs at all. With a wave of his hand, a flying dart flew out as he laughed loudly. "My pretty ladies, I'm going to play a game with you today. I'm going to blindly throw out this dart, and whoever it hits, that person shall remove an article of clothing. Understood?" The bodies of the 25 women trembled, but none of them dared to resist. "The dart won't kill you." The noble youth laughed softly. He gave it a toss. Swoosh! The dart flew out like lightning, striking towards the group of 25 young women. But in the blink of an eye, it then returned into the hand of that noble youth. Ah! A weak, surprised cry. A hint of blood appeared on the chest of one of the young ladies. What fresh blood! The noble youth extended his tongue, licking the fresh blood from the flying dart, then laughed softly. Undress. He was confident in his skills. The darts would just barely slash open the skin of these ladies. Although it would hurt, at most there would be a hint of blood. Nobody would die. The young lady's body was trembling, but she still took off an article of clothing. Continue. The noble youth once more threw out the flying dart. This game continued non-stop. In but a few moments, each and every one of the 25 women had undressed, all of them standing there, slick and naked, amidst the flower garden. The housekeeper had quietly left long ago. He knew that His Imperial Highness hated it when other men looked at his female playthings. His Imperial Highness could play with them, but if others were to watch, they would die. The 25 women stood there, naked and trembling, thin lines of blood flowing from their bodies. The strange thing was, the bloody lines actually formed words. Whore. Love. Slut. Bloody words were on the bodies of every single woman. This strange scene made it so that these women were all the more frightened, and unable to resist. Oh! Seeing this, the noble youth suddenly grew so excited that his entire body began to tremble. How wonderful! This is absolutely a work of art. All right, whore, you come over. Yes, you, the one with the character for whore on your body. The noble youth played with the dart, which danced in the air as though it were alive. The naked woman, terrified, walked over one step at a time. Right at this moment. Whoosh! Suddenly, a wild wind stirred, and the clothes on the ground suddenly flew up, wrapping themselves around those 25 women. At the same time, the 25 women, along with the serving maid next to the noble youth, entered a dreamy, dazed state, losing all consciousness. The noble youth turned to look, his gaze growing sharp as a dagger. A brown-haired man had suddenly appeared, dressed in a white suit and with white ribbons wrapped in his hair. He was walking forward, one step at a time. Who are you? The noble youth's face changed. Odin is your father, right? Linley said calmly. If you know this, how dare you be so arrogant? The noble youth said, but his body was already moving. Rumble, a strange soul ripple spread out. The eyes of the noble youth instantly became dull and lifeless as he entered a dazed state. This was the supreme support technique, the spiritual chaos component to Linley's Blackstone space. When Linley had been a god, he was already capable of making ordinary Highgods enter a stupor. And now, a kid who relied on fusing with a divine spark to become a Highgod thinks that he can run from me. Linley cast him a calm glance. Linley stretched his hand out. With a slash sound, he drove his hand into the youth's skull, and a surge of divine earth power instantly reduced the contents of the youth's skull to mush. Time for the next one. Linley picked up the noble youth's corpse. With a flicker, his body disappeared. Not long after Linley left, the women regained their consciousness, but they were completely lost and puzzled. That housekeeper wasn't too concerned. He knew that His Imperial Highness was a high god, and that in the entire Yulan continent, there wasn't much who could threaten him. He thought that His Imperial Highness had suddenly gone to take care of some business. The Odin Empire. The imperial capital. This was a city that had been rebuilt atop the ruins of the former imperial capital of the Yulan Empire. The imperial palace was particularly majestic and tightly guarded. Today, the imperial capital of the Odin Empire was particularly rowdy, because a delegation of envoys from the Barak Empire had come to pay their respects to His Imperial Majesty, Odin. Ever since the founding of the Odin Empire 1,000 years ago, the relationship between the two empires had been extremely tense. But now, envoys had actually been sent to pay their respects to Emperor Odin. This was quite a rare occasion. The Odin Empire. The Imperial Palace. The main hall. The senior ministers of the empire were all standing below the throne, smiles on their faces. As they saw it, for the Barak Empire to send envoys here was a show of subservience. This gave them a feeling of having dominated the Barak Empire. Your Imperial Majesty, The envoys are already outside the palace. The palace attendant said respectfully. Haha, let them enter. Odin, seated on the throne, laughed loudly as he spoke. Odin was someone who cared deeply about face, who cared greatly about perfection. He liked being above everyone else, liked making countless others look up to him. He liked the feeling of controlling someone's fate in his hands, and he loved to toy with people. To be able to control the joy, the rage, and the grief of others, this was something that made him very delighted and very happy. Almighty Emperor Odin, we are here representing the Emperor of the Barak Empire and conveying his most sincere greetings. The leading envoy of the Barak Empire bowed slightly, then continued, on this visit, our Barak Empire has prepared two marvelous treasures to offer you, Emperor Odin. A hint of a smile appeared on Odin's face. Bring it up for me to look at. Immediately, the envoys brought two large chests in from outside the main hall, letting them rest heavily against the floor of the palace. Open them. Odin laughed calmly. Emperor Odin, please take a look. The envoy opened one of the large chests, and as he did, shocked gasps could be heard throughout the main hall. As for Emperor Odin, seated on his throne, when he saw the treasure within the chest, his face immediately changed. Njemalar Nimola. No. Njemalar was Odin's one and only brother. This, the ministers in the hall were all shocked, not knowing what to say. The envoy just laughed cold as he opened the other chest. Clang. The lid of the chest swung upon, then clanged against the floor. Odin felt his heart clench violently, and he stared fixedly at the corpse within the chest. Son. My son. Odin couldn't believe it. He shook his head repeatedly. Life in the Gabados planar prison was extremely dangerous. When Odin had entered it, he was a weakling as well. Although he was wild, although he liked to toy with others, although he liked to kill, he didn't wish for his loved ones to die. Throughout all those years he had spent in the planar prison, he had always protected his son and his brother. This time, they had passed through that dangerous weakness in the spatial walls and had returned to the Yulan continent. Passing through a weakness in the spatial walls was something which had to do with the amount of energy one possessed. The strength of the spatial bindings was variable, and the more energy one had, the stronger the spatial bindings were and the harder to break through them. The spatial bindings didn't have much to do with insight into any profound mysteries. After all, insight was illusory and immaterial. The strength of the bindings facing ordinary Highgods and 7-star fiends was the same, when they attempted to pass through a spatial weakness. He had only taken 2 Highgods with him. One was his son. The other was his brother. He had risked his life to take the 2 of them with him, and they had managed to flee the prison. As for his other subordinates he had brought, they were only gods and demigods. For him to be willing to risk his own life to bring these 2 with him made it obvious how much he cared about them. But today, both his brother and his son had died. Their corpses were right here in front of him. He had been very careful in the planar prison, but in the Yulan continent, aside from his own forces, the only Highgod present was Beirut. There were no other Highgods. He didn't believe his brother and son would ever be in any danger. But today, their corpses were in chests in front of him. No, no. Odin bellowed in rage. Seize him. Odin stared viciously at that envoy. Immediately, many soldiers flooded forward, surrounding those envoys. With but a flicker, Odin's body appeared next to the 2 chests. He stared at the corpse in the right chest, then at the corpse in the left chest, his face like iron. Njemalar. Chesterki site. You, how could you? His entire body was trembling, and not a hint of blood could be seen in his face. My brother. My son. Don't worry. I will definitely avenge you. Definitely. I will make them regret it. I will make their lives worse than death. Odin turned suddenly, staring at the envoy. Tell me who killed them. Odin roared. He knew very well that only a Highgod could have killed his son and brother. Humph. The envoy just let out a cold snort. Me. An icy voice rang out in the main hall. Instantly, everyone in the main hall, Odin included, turned to look. A figure had suddenly appeared outside of the main hall. This person was striding into the hall, one step at a time, the soldiers by his side completely unable to block him. He wore white mourning ribbons in his hair, and was dressed in ceremonial white robes. Seeing this, the ministers in the hall were all stunned. This clearly was a ceremonial mourning outfit meant for mourning deceased family members. Odin stared at Linley, his eyes spitting fire. Who are you? Odin growled. If you have decent memory, you should remember that you once killed two people. One was my second brother, while the other was my elder brother. Linley said in a soft voice. He hadn't appeared for nearly 2,000 years. There was nobody who recognized him today. Odin frowned, completely unable to tell who this person was. It seems you really have killed quite a few people. Linley stared at him coldly. Listen up. I am Linley Barak. The ministers in the Great Hall were all shocked. They stared at Linley in disbelief. This youth dressed in ceremonial mourning robes was actually the founding emperor of the Barak Empire, a figure of legend in the history of the Yulan Empire, Linley. Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 9, Battle. Linley Barak. Odin immediately knew who this person was. Linley's reputation in the Yulan continent was simply too great. In terms of status, he was on a higher level than even the war god and the high priest had been on in the past. After all, Linley's accomplishments were simply too legendary. Odin's face was ashen, and he stared fixedly at Linley, grinding out one word at a time, "You dare to come? If I don't come, how am I going to kill you?" Linley's voice was like ice. Ha ha ha, Odin laughed from sheer rage. The deaths of his brother and his son had caused Odin's rage to rise to the heavens. In addition, he knew what Linley had accomplished. Nearly 2,000 years ago, Linley had just become a deity. As Odin saw it, no matter how great a genius Linley was, he would at most be able to become a high god. To fuse profound mysteries. That wasn't something that could be done in such a short period of time. In the instant in which Odin laughed from rage, his entire body transformed into a blur, instantly appearing before Linley. With a crunch sound, Linley's body was struck and sent flying outside of the palace. Odin let out a cold laugh towards the outside of the palace, then flew out as well. Linley and Emperor Odin are battling. Immediately, all of the ministers within the hall flooded outwards. Even many of the palace maids and attendants ran out as well. All of them looked about wildly and also towards the skies, hoping to see Linley and Odin. But they saw nothing. His Imperial Majesty against Grand Master Linley, who do you think will win? The ministers discussed this amongst each other. With a wave of his hand, His Imperial Majesty destroyed half of the imperial capital of the Yulan Empire. Given his power, he will definitely win. Grand Master Linley has disappeared for 2,000 years. Given his dominating talent, he's definitely grown even more powerful. Just as the many ministers were chatting amongst each other, suddenly, a terrifying explosive sound rang out from the corner of the imperial palace. Boom! From afar, a palace suddenly blew apart, sending countless pieces of rocks and tiles shooting everywhere at high speed. When these pieces of rock smashed into the palace walls hundreds of meters away, they smashed giant holes into them. Countless miserable cries could be heard as well as many helpless maids and attendants were struck by then. Some had their heads smashed apart, others had their limbs severed. But the ministers continued to stare into the skies. As for those envoys who were being guarded by the palace guards, they were watching as well. In the air above the Odin Empire's imperial palace, Linley and Odin had come to a pause. Linley was in full dragon form, his entire body covered with draconic scales. He stared coldly at Odin with his dark golden eyes. As for Odin, a look of disbelief was on his face. Impossible. Impossible. The exchange of blows from earlier had completely stunned Odin. Material attacks. Linley said coldly. I understand that you are specialized in the edicts of death. Why don't you use those attacks? Linley realized through the exchange of blows with Odin that this person was only using wind-type laws, and was emanating a wind-type aura as well, with no hint of a death-type aura. Based on what Linley knew, this Odin, reputed to be the Vile King, was an expert who specialized in the edicts of death. Odin gritted his teeth, staring fixed at Linley. Against you, I don't need it. I'll let you know what regret is. After speaking, his body suddenly moved as a tornado sprang into being out of nowhere. Odin, in the center of the tornado, charged towards Linley with an aura of power that seemed capable of destroying the world, landing a powerful knife-edge palm blow against Linley. Crackle! A clearly visible crack in space appeared, but this was a material plane. Highgods were capable of easily shattering space here. Laughable. Linley didn't even dodge. He just charged at Odin, allowing this knife-edge palm to land on his body. Clang! When the knife-edge palm blow landed on Linley's body, a metallic ringing sound could be heard. A faint white smudge appeared on Linley's draconic scales, but that was it. This absolutely stunned Odin, leaving him gaping. But Linley seized the opportunity to reach out with his draconic claws, grabbing Odin by his right shoulder and giving it a vicious twist. Ryip! Blood and flesh flew everywhere, as the right arm was directly ripped off. Whoosh! The draconic tail came sweeping over as well, moving as fast as lightning. Odin hurriedly dodged, but despite how fast he moved, a deep wound was left upon his waist, with fresh blood dripping out of it. Odin stared at Linley, stunned. How can your body be so, he muttered, as his wounds quickly healed. Only, it took a bit of time for his severed arm to grow out. Too weak. Too weak. Linley said calmly. At the same time, he released his right hand, allowed the torn-off right arm of Odin's to fall down from the skies, smashing into pieces on the surface of the Imperial Palace. The material attack Odin had launched, the one which had created the tornado, had caused quite a bit of destruction in the Imperial Palace. Those ministers had their faces smudged with dirt and ash, and they were hiding behind the protection of the palace guards. Impossible! Odin bellowed, charging forward once again. Odin's entire body transformed into a blurry sword shape, and the illusory greatsword chopped directly at Linley. Linley let out a cold, calm laugh. His speed suddenly increased dramatically as he dodged the sword attack, while at the same time delivering a mighty blow with his claws to Odin's face. A large chunk of flesh was ripped off of Odin's face, and he was knocked flying backwards. Too slow as well. Linley continued. After having become a high god, Linley's speed had improved dramatically as well, especially given how powerful his draconic body was. His speed was vastly superior to Odin's divine wind clone. Odin wasn't able to fight back at all. After all, Odin was only using his divine wind clone at present, not his strongest death-type clone. Odin turned to stare at Linley, his eyes filled with shock and rage. He wasn't able to accept this. How can he be so strong? Odin couldn't believe it. Where is your death-type clone? Even as Linley's words came out, Linley himself appeared before Odin, launching out his right leg in a kick that was like a decapitating blade towards Odin's neck. Terrified, Odin frantically dodged backwards, but although he was able to dodge the kick, and before he even had the chance to take a breath, with a bang sound, Odin was slashed by Linley's draconic tail, which slammed against his waist. Odin's body was bisected into two. His bones and his organs all came flooding out from his upper torso. The upper half of his body was knocked flying back. Aren't you supposed to be very powerful? Linley's voice rang out. Bang! Linley's fist smashed against Odin's chest, which split open like mud, caving in at Linley's blow, fresh blood spewing out. However, Odin's lower torso quickly began to grow out, and his left arm swung violently against Linley's body. "Aren't you supposed to be the Vile King?" Bang! A leg landed against that left arm, sending Odin flying away yet again. "Aren't you supposed to make me know what regret is?" Linley landed a palm against Odin's head, and Odin was shot out like an arrow, smashing downwards with a bang into the stone floor, causing the entire ground to shake and split apart, while Odin himself was completely submerged into it. Linley slowly descended, landing on the ground. "Come on. If you aren't dead, that is," Linley said calmly. From the very beginning, Linley had refrained from using killing blows. If Odin were to die so easily, that would be too merciful towards him. Linley clearly remembered how Odin had tormented his boss Yale. There were quite a few people watching this battle, and there were tens of deity-level experts in the imperial palace of the Odin Empire. These were all Odin's subordinates. They were watching in disbelief. Their invincible Vile King was being utterly trampled, without being able to fight back at all. His Imperial Majesty. The senior ministers were all stupefied as well. "Humph. Your Odin Empire is finished." Those surrounded envoys of the Barak Empire raised their heads high. At this moment, a group of people watching this battle from afar in the sky flew over as well. It was Bibi, Wharton, Delia, Taylor, and some others. They all flew into the Imperial Palace. To them, the Imperial Palace was a place where they could roam about as they pleased. Nobody was able to stop them. Reynolds, watching this battle, couldn't help but shed tears. "Boss. Second bro, Odin is going to die. Your deaths will be avenged." Right now, in the center of this arena, the earth lay cracked and shattered. A figure slowly crawled out from within. It was Odin. Odin's body was now completely repaired, but his eyes were still filled with rage and disbelief. "Any other ultimate attacks?" Linley laughed coldly. As he spoke, Linley's body suddenly advanced at such speed that although Odin struggled to dodge, Linley's leg flashed out and kicked him viciously in his crotch. An explosive, ripping sound could be heard, followed by Odin's anguished howl as he was sent flying upwards before landing on the ground again. "Where is your death-type clone?" Linley stared at him emotionlessly. "What, would you rather sacrifice your Divine Wind clone than let your death-type clone come out?" As Linley saw it, this clone of Odin's wasn't very strong. Linley's true target was Odin's death-type clone. You, Odin stared towards Linley with utter hatred. He wanted to kill Linley, but he wasn't able to. "Linley. You are vicious. You are a piece of work," Odin said with fury. "But you won't be able to kill me." With a bellow, Odin instantly transformed into thousands of doppelgangers, all of which fled wildly every which way. This was the doppelganger technique of the laws of the wind. Seeing this, Linley didn't even move. Suddenly, a blurry earthen yellow aura instantly spread out to a diameter of 1,000 meters, and a terrifying gravitational pull was instantly applied to all of Odin's doppelgangers. But of course, the other people within this area, such as the maids, servants, Reynolds, Bibi, and the others weren't affected by it at all. Bang! Bang! A series of explosions could be heard as those doppelgangers began to implode from the terrifying pressure. Explosive bursts of energy rocked the grounds of the Imperial Palace, and the palace walls were once more damaged by it. The scene was one of utter chaos. Linley's most powerful technique, Blackstone Space. The gravity was centered towards Linley. The only one of Odin's bodies which had yet to explode was his Divine Wind clone. This was normal. After having become a Highgod, Linley's Blackstone Space had risen tenfold in power, far greater than it had been in the past. In such a terrifyingly powerful area of gravity, even 7-star fiends would find it hard to resist. If a body was too weak, it wouldn't just sink downwards. It would collapse and implode. Bodies that were formed purely from energy had to be stable. If the stability was impacted and unable to withstand such a powerful gravity, the only result was collapse and explosion. Crackle, Odin frantically tried to resist the gravitational pull, but his body continued to be drawn towards Linley's. This, Odin didn't dare believe it. What, you still aren't going to reveal your death-type clone? Linley laughed coldly. He had already sent out his divine sense, encompassing the entire Yulan continent. But Linley wasn't able to find or sense the aura of Odin's death-type clone. I admire you. Odin returned to his icy calm. In 2,000 years, you've become so very powerful. Your gravitational space is indeed formidable. Go ahead and kill me. Odin actually chose not to fight back. It wasn't that he didn't want to, it was that he understood he wasn't able to. Thus, he chose death. You want to die? Linley snickered. Have you forgotten what you did to my big brother, Yale? Odin's face had a stunned look on it. Rumble, spiritual energy came sweeping out, and the spiritual chaos effect was applied to Odin's soul. Linley's spiritual chaos technique was extremely monstrous by now. As a Highgod, he was able to cause ordinary 5-star fiends and 6-star fiends to enter a state of stupor. And indeed, Odin's eyes grew dim and lifeless. So indeed, he only has the power of a 5-star fiend. At most, he just barely approaches the power of a 6-star fiend. Linley's appearance changed as he returned to human form, while at the same time, those white funeral robes appeared around him once more. Odin just stood there dumbly. Linley turned to look, sweeping the imperial palace with his gaze, then said in a clear voice, Odin is no longer able to fight back. As he spoke, Linley gave Odin a kick, and Odin, like a puppet, was kicked into the ground, not moving at all. The experts who saw this all felt stunned. Clearly, Odin was unconscious. Now, the 82 deities within the imperial palace are all to come out. If you do not, the next to die will be you. Linley's cold voice rang out, while he also spoke out with his divine sense, allowing it to enter the minds of those 82. Those 82 were originally the subordinates of Odin. Now, terrified, they immediately flew over. Linley's gaze turned towards Odin. Die. I will make sure you die in agony and humiliation. Linley's gaze was as cold and emotionless as ice. Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 10, The Manner of Death. Dozens of figures flew over in the air in an impressive host, and the tens of deities already present in the imperial palace flew over as well, terrified. In a short period of time, all 82 deities were assembled. Frightened and nervous, they stared at Linley. They didn't know what Linley was going to do to them. They were frustrated as well. How could Linley be so powerful? They had come with Odin from the planar prison to the Yulan continent, but they had never held the legendary Linley in any regard. But it seemed as though Linley was unreasonably strong. Lord Linley, these things have nothing to do with us. We just obeyed the orders of Lord Odin. One of them, a green-haired, middle-aged man said hurriedly. It had nothing to do with us. Lord Linley, spare our lives. The 82 all begged for mercy. Having seen Linley's power, they understood that Linley was completely capable of just using his divine sense to attack all 82 of them. Not a single one of them would escape. Shut your mouths. Linley said emotionlessly. Immediately, all of the 82 deities fell silent, not daring to say a word. The entire devastated imperial palace was deathly silent. Those ministers, palace attendants, maids, and guards who stood in the distance were in a state of panic as well. All these years, they had known that the experts under the control of Odin were all exceedingly strong. But today, Odin had been beaten like a dog and was now lying on the ground. Those 82 figures were standing there like a pack of slaves, not daring to make a sound. And the person who had caused all this was that brown-haired man. Fourth bro Delia. If you want to take revenge, do what you please to him. Linley sent mentally. Linley had no other options. He was unable to seal this clone's divine power, because this person was a Highgod. Linley had to rely on the black stone in order to send Odin into a dazed stupor. This bastard! Reynolds bellowed, and he flashed forward, moving like lightning. His entire body began to blaze with flames, and his right leg spun out like a tornado. Bang! It violently clashed against Odin's waist, smashing Odin and sending him rolling forward on the ground into the distance, colliding with the distant stone pillar of the devastated palace. As Odin's body smashed into the stone pillar collapsed as well. Bastard! Bastard! Reynolds muttered, his eyes crimson as he stared at Odin. He flew over once more, stepping on Odin repeatedly. Bang! 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 Reynolds was giving vent to his rage. As for Linley, he just emotionlessly watched this happen. At the same time, a ball of water floated out from Linley's forehead, and a blurry blue light reflected the events in the distance. Linley was using his divine water clone to execute the scryer technique, and was recording these events. Reynolds! Delia growled. Reynolds took a breather, turning to look at Delia, then stepping away to make way for her. As for Delia, she held the spear of Cortez in her hands, then stabbed it viciously at Odin's body. Chest, legs, thigh, arms, waist, Delia savagely used the spear to stab him while cursing non-stop at him, and as she did, her tears began to fall as well. Big brother! Dixie had died. No matter what sort of revenge she took, Delia still was unable to accept it. Delia, Linley could completely imagine what sort of pain Delia was in, because he was suffering that same pain. Death wasn't frightening, in and of itself, but to die the way Yale had, after having been tortured to the point of insanity. That was terrifying. No matter what we do to torture this Odin, it won't be enough. Won't be enough. And his death-type clone, I will definitely destroy it as well. How vicious! Those 82 distant deities watched as Delia and Reynolds took their vengeance, and their hearts quailed as they watched. Reynolds and Delia were both taking a breather. The 82 of you. Linley turned to look at them. Lord Linley. The 82 were extremely respectful. Linley said icily, each of you, come up with a method to humiliate Odin. Remember, humiliate. Just stabbing him with a sword isn't enough. If someone is unable to come up with something, I will kill that person. The 82 deities were stunned. Oh! Linley's gaze was like an icy dagger as he swept them with his eyes. Would you prefer death instead? The 82 deities stared at each other. Odin was their leader, after all. But after hesitating slightly, they all began to walk towards Odin. They knew their own limits, and they could tell that Odin was definitely going to die. Since he was going to die, humiliating him wasn't a big deal. Odin, who would have thought that you'd have a day like this? One of the deities said, stabbing Odin viciously in the throat. Don't kill him. Linley growled. The most important part was the head, as that was where the divine spark was located. Remember. Humiliate him. Linley said coldly. You call that humiliation? Not enough. These deities looked at Linley, and then, gritting their teeth, they began to use all sorts of methods to humiliate him, either using the spears to stab at Odin's nether regions, or even tearing his clothes off. Moments later, Odin's body had become utterly horrific to behold. But seeing this, Linley didn't feel satisfied at all. His eyes were still like ice. Big bro, everything's ready. A voice rang out from behind. It was Wharton. Bring those people over. Linley ordered. Immediately, a group of people began walking over from the various shattered walls of the palace. They were beggars. These were beggars that had been summoned over from all over the imperial capital. Although the imperial capital was fabulously rich, it had its poor regions as well, along with a large number of beggars. Hundreds of filthy beggars had entered the imperial palace. Oh ho, so this is the imperial palace. The eyes of the beggars were all shining. Go. Please, use your imagination to come up with ways to humiliate that person on the ground. Each of you will receive a gold coin, and whoever does well will be gifted with 100 additional gold coins. The youthful-looking man leading these beggars said in a clear voice. 100 gold coins. The eyes of the beggars lit up. Ha ha, humiliate someone? Easy. A big fellow rushed forward. Those 100 gold coins are definitely mine. The hundreds of beggars, all wanting to be first and none wanting to be last, charged forward. They had no idea that the person on the ground was a Highgod. No idea that this was the emperor of the Odin Empire. All they knew was that if they performed well, they would receive 100 gold coins. To these beggars, 100 gold coins was a sum of money which could make them go crazy. All of you, come. The youthful leader immediately barked. Ha ha, the first beggar immediately urinated into Odin's mouth. That's nothing. The second beggar sneered, walking to Odin as well. One beggar after another came forward, summoning all of their imaginations in their desire to win the 100 gold coins, and using all sorts of ways to humiliate this person. Seeing this, the 82 Highgods were in shock, and their faces turned white. Compared to these beggars, they were simply too gentle, what they did could only be considered punishing. What these beggars were doing truly caused one to be in a state worse than death. Hey, this fellow's skin is so tough. I'm not able to cut it open no matter what I do. One beggar called out. This beggar was holding a needle, as though wanting to do something to punish him, but unfortunately, this was the body of a Highgod, after all. Although Odin didn't specialize in body training, his body was still made from divine power. How could an ordinary beggar possibly pierce the skin of a body formed from divine power? Next. The young man said emotionlessly. I should be the winner. Those 100 coins should be mine. I haven't even had the chance to use my skills. The needle-holding beggar immediately called out. F***ck off. A beggar in the rear pushed him aside. Haha, it's daddy's turn now. As he spoke, he flipped Odin's body over. That's going a bit too far. Some of the ministers weren't even able to watch any further. But Linley just watched this emotionlessly, not a single hint of an expression on his face. Linley had to admit, these techniques did go a bit too far, and were enough to make a person go insane from humiliation. But he was only humiliating a single person, Odin. As for Odin, he destroyed all of the core members of the Dawson conglomerate, forcing Yale to kill his own family. In addition, he didn't even let Yale die, he tormented Yale instead. Compared to this, what was happening to Odin was quite benevolent. Let them go. Linley said calmly. Yes. The youth said respectfully, immediately leading the beggars away. Linley stared at the filthy, naked, blood-stained body wearing tattered clothes, but felt no pity in his heart at all. At the same time, Linley retracted his spiritual power, but expanded his blackstone space once more, trapping Odin within. Odin's eyes opened. Odin looked at himself. His face immediately changed. Bang! Divine wind power swirled, and Odin's body became completely purified, and a new set of robes appeared as well. Odin forced himself to his feet, staring at Linley. What did you do to me? What did I do? Linley laughed calmly. Why don't you watch for yourself as to what was done with but a thought? Linley made the crystal ball above his head shoot out rays of blue light, forming a massive image in the air above them. The images began to move, replaying what had just happened. Linley naturally had recorded it all. After all, Odin had been in a state of spiritual stupor. If he didn't know what had happened, how could Odin be tormented by it? This, Odin's face changed, and he couldn't help but look towards Reynolds and Delia. The scryer recording had finished displaying the images of what Delia and Reynolds had done. Next, it began to broadcast what the 82 deities had done. The tactics the 82 deities had used were far more excessive. Odin's face was ashen, and he couldn't help but turn to stare at those 82 men. You had the gall. The group of deities couldn't help but feel startled, but then they recovered, and one laughed. Humph, Odin, you are about to die. What are you being so arrogant for? You, watching the various events occur, Odin grew speechless from rage. Odin, keep watching. The best part has yet to start. Linley said calmly. In the scryer recording, the beggars had appeared. Odin's eyes turned round. Beggars. He, Odin, was a venerable, exalted high god. To high gods, even saints were like ants. As for ordinary mortals, they were to be killed as he pleased. People as lowly as these beggars, Odin couldn't even be bothered to look at. He, a high god, to be spat on by mortal beggars. He thought he might go insane. But the scryer recordings showed something even worse than he imagined. The first beggar had urinated into his mouth. Odin's fists were clenched, and his face first turned ashen, then turned black, before turning red. His eyes seemed to spit fire at the images. Those beggars, for the sake of the 100 gold coins, had used up all of their imagination, each one more excessive than the last. The scenes were utterly depraved and utterly disgusting. Odin was a person who pursued perfect and who cared deeply about his face. But what was happening in the scryer recordings was even worse to him than killing him. Odin's entire body was trembling, and his mind was in a state of chaos. Humiliation. Incomparable humiliation. Worse than death. Linley, you will definitely die in my hands. Definitely. Odin stared at Linley with a deathly gaze. Odin, today's just the first day. We'll continue tomorrow. Linley said calmly. Odin was so angry that a hint of blood came out from his lips. But then, Odin suddenly turned his head to the skies, laughing wildly. Ha ha, you are vicious. Vicious. Odin stared at Linley, as though he wanted to skin Linley alive. Linley, I have to say though, your skill in humiliating someone is still rather lacking. Compared to what I did to your older brother, Yale. You are a long way off. Do you know how I tortured him, when I hung him up on that tree in the palace? Ha ha, I imagine, that he wouldn't dare tell anyone of it. He wouldn't even dare think about it. Ha ha, although he was saying this, Odin had already been tormented to the brink of madness. Linley just stared at him coldly. No matter how incredible you are, all you will be able to do is destroy my divine wind clone. My most important body is my death-type clone. If my divine wind clone is destroyed, it is destroyed. It doesn't matter. If my son dies, I'll have another one. Haha, let me tell you this. My death-type clone went to the Netherworld long ago. If you have the ability to do so, come find me in the Netherworld. Haha, as for further humiliating me, haha, in your dreams. Bang. While wildly laughing, Odin's body suddenly exploded. Self-explosion. The surrounding group of experts were all stunned. None of them had imagined that Odin would actually choose to die like this. Clearly, Odin was no longer able to withstand this sort of torment and humiliation, and had chosen suicide instead. Linley's gaze was like ice. The Netherworld. Linley murmured to himself. Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 11, A Pleasant Surprise. Odin's sudden self-detonation caused the 82 deities to be shocked. They all waited nervously. Suddenly, Linley turned to look towards them. The 82 deities immediately said, Lord Linley, we completely obeyed your orders. Please spare us. What we did in the past, we did at the orders of Lord Odin. We had no choice. They were all begging for mercy. Father, you cannot spare them. Taylor's frantic shout came from behind. HRM. Linley turned to look. Reynolds, by Taylor's side, said in an equally frantic voice, "Third bro, these 82 absolutely cannot be spared. When those saints were killed, it wasn't Odin who personally did the deed, it was these claws of his. George was killed by this group of people as well, and Dixie was killed by them as well. It was them." Delia couldn't help but turn and look, her eyes filled with hatred. What sort of status did Odin have? How could he possibly lower himself to kill saints? All of these vicious acts had most likely been carried out by these claws of his. The 82 began to panic. "Lord Linley, we can't be blamed. It was Lord Odin's orders." Linley swept them with a cold look. One of the deities, terrified, actually began to flee while frantically calling out through divine sense, "Flee, quick." He could already sense that things were growing grim from Linley's gaze. As he fled, immediately, the other 82 began to flee as well. Some flew into the skies, others drilled into the ground. Rumble. An earthen yellow aura instantly spread out in every direction, forming an enormous sphere that was thousands of meters in diameter. It even sank 2,000 meters into the ground. Within this sphere, the 82 deities were completely trapped. Even 7 star fiends would find it hard to resist this gravity. Bang! A minority of them, those who had weak bodies, crumbled and collapsed from the gravity alone. Fortunately, as long as a deity's soul wasn't destroyed, death would not come. The 82 deities, although controlled by that powerful gravity and being pulled towards Linley, didn't die at least. Lord Linley. The deities who had been trying to flee were frantically begging for mercy. "Father! Kill them! Avenge Uncle!" Taylor said frantically. "Third bro!" Reynolds said as well. Linley swept the 82 with his cold gaze. "True, you were the subordinates of Odin and had to obey his orders. But in the past 1,000 years, none of you have departed from the Yulan plane. You willingly remained behind, and so you were serving Odin and obeying him out of your own free will. You cannot blame others for your death. If these deities had wanted to escape Odin's control, they could have simply gone to the Arctic ice cap and departed to the higher planes. Odin wouldn't have cared. Linley, you. The 82 deities began to beg for mercy in terror, curse in rage, or just mumble. But under that gravitational pull, they flew at high speed to Linley's side. Linley sent out a surge of divine earth power like arrows into the 82. A low rumbling sound could be heard. The 82 figures transformed into dust. "Warden, you take care of these things." The floor was littered with divine sparks, interspatial rings, and divine artifacts. They were caught up in a surge of divine power and floated towards Warden. These demigod sparks and god sparks, in a material plane, were still very precious. Warden immediately collected all of the things. "Let's return." Linley didn't have a hint of a smile on his face. He just charged into the skies. The forces of Dragon Blood Castle immediately flew into the skies as well, leaving behind only 2 saints. These 2 saints immediately headed towards the surrounded and bound envoys of the Barak Empire. Seeing the situation, the soldiers around the envoys were so frightened, they hurriedly loosened the bonds. "Haha, your Odin Empire is finished," an envoy said in a clear voice. The ministers of the Odin Empire all looked at each other. They understood as well, that in front of the overwhelming power of the Barak Empire, the Odin Empire had indeed been finished. The Empire is finished. This battle in the imperial capital of the Odin Empire and Linley's sudden appearance and killing of Odin as well as 82 deities caused the entire Yulan continent to once more enter a state of chaos. Those experts who previously had been subjugated by Odin's power, how could they remain loyal to the Odin Empire now? They immediately rebelled against the Odin Empire. In the space of a single night, the entire Odin Empire collapsed. Although Odin had more than 82 deities under his control, with a few more scattered throughout the Yulan continent, once they learned that Odin and the 82 deities had died, they were so terrified that they immediately fled to the Arctic ice cap, all of them leaving the Yulan plain. The Odin Empire disintegrated at an astonishing speed. And the Barak Empire? It expanded at an astonishing speed. The entire Yulan continent once more knew of Linley's presence. Grandmaster Linley, who had disappeared for nearly 2,000 years, had suddenly reappeared. That Emperor Odin had been killed. The entire Yulan continent was rocked by the news of this battle. Dragonblood Castle. It had been nearly half a month since the killing of Odin. During this half-month, Linley and BB had remained within Dragonblood Castle. Although Linley knew that Odin's Death-type clone was in the Netherworld, the Netherworld was simply too vast. How could he find him? It was like searching for a needle in the sea. "Third bro, drink less," Reynolds said. At this moment, Linley and Reynolds were seated facing each other within a courtyard, drinking wine. None of them wanted to discuss Odin or Yale. Linley was actually just drinking non-stop, gulping down one bottle after another of wine into his belly. "Third bro." Reynolds grabbed Linley's arm, forcing Linley to halt. Linley slammed the bottle to the side, then looked bitterly at Reynolds, sighing softly, "Fourth bro, I feel miserable." Linley raised his head, tears in his eyes. "When I think of what happened to Boss Yale, I feel miserable. Have I avenged him? With all my power, all I did was kill Odin's Divine Wind clone. To Odin, his Divine Wind clone wasn't nearly as important as his Death-type clone. And that clone is in the distant Netherworld. And Boss Yale? He was so shattered that you had to go kill him, fourth bro." When Linley thought about what Yale had experienced, he couldn't help but feel the rage build in his heart, making it ache. "I want to go to the Netherworld and kill Odin, but finding Odin is too difficult. The Netherworld is simply too vast, too vast." The Netherworld was like the infernal realm, both were higher planes. Just by looking at the infernal realm, one could imagine how if Odin had secreted himself into a corner of the Netherworld, that Linley could spend countless years without being able to find him. "Third bro." Reynolds was heartsick as well, but he consoled Linley, "This isn't your fault. Boss Yale did die an unjust death, an extremely unjust one. But if you hadn't returned, we wouldn't have been able to kill even as much as Odin's Divine Wind clone. You've already done very well. I think, if Boss Yale knew of this, he would also feel slightly consoled." Linley laughed bitterly. "At most, slightly consoled. In terms of pain, in terms of humiliation, in terms of torment, Yale had suffered far more than Odin had. The loss of his Divine Wind clone didn't have too great an impact on Odin. He was still a 7-star fiend, and was still a powerful figure in the Netherworld. Whenever Linley thought about how Odin was free to roam the Netherworld, Linley felt the unjustness of it all. He wanted to torment Odin, but in terms of what he was capable of, he had done all that he could. Odin truly deserves to die. Linley couldn't help but say this yet again. He does deserve to die. 10,000 deaths wouldn't be enough. Reynolds said viciously as well. If he had simply killed Boss Yale, I wouldn't hate him as much as I do right now. But whenever Reynolds thought of the last time he had seen Yale and had seen how Yale was at the point of collapse, of that dispirited, tormented body. Yale had been too pitiable. He had already gone insane. Alas! Linley was still furious. He couldn't help but slam the table, and with a bang, the table split apart. "Boss, boss!" a voice rang out from afar. Linley turned to look, only to see a black-robed Beirut and BB enter together, with Wharton, Delia, Nissa, Wade, and the others following from behind. Beirut looked at the shattered table in surprise. "Oh, Linley, What is it? Why'd you smash the table? Lord Beirut. Linley forced a smile out. He was indeed in a terrible mood. Feeling angry and upset over what happened to your friend. Beirut laughed calmly. Linley didn't say a word. Actually, deep in his heart, Linley was still slightly upset at Beirut. Beirut definitely had known that Odin's death-type clone had left the Yulan plane. But Beirut hadn't stopped him at all. Still, Linley didn't say anything. Because? Why should Beirut help him? The fact that he occasionally helped out was enough. He couldn't always be looking after Linley's affairs. I know exactly what happened. Beirut let out a low sigh. Originally, I was planning to leave Odin for you to handle. But on one occasion, I was on a visit to inspect the necropolis of the gods. During that period of time, Odin's death-type clone left to go to the Netherworld. Beirut voluntarily explained, making Linley feel a surge of gratitude. Actually, Beirut hadn't needed to explain. The reason he explained was because he now considered Linley as a member of his family. The Netherworld. Delia shook her head. The Netherworld is too vast. Finding Odin will be too hard. Unfortunately, yes. Beirut sighed as well. Bibi said resignedly, Grandpa just so happened to be in the necropolis. Geez. Suddenly, Bibi's eyes lit up and he looked at Beirut. Grandpa, my boss said that this time, we should go adventure in the necropolis of the gods. Help us open it up sometime. This was something which Linley and Bibi had already discussed in the infernal realm. On this return trip, investigating the necropolis of the gods was indeed something they had planned. But after the Odin event, Linley was no longer in the mood. Investigate the necropolis. Beirut raised an eyebrow, then shook his head. Bibi, there's no point for you going to the necropolis. As for Linley, Beirut looked towards Linley. Linley couldn't help but listen carefully, musing to himself, when I went to the necropolis of the gods, I sensed that deep within it, something was beckoning to me. I wonder what lay hidden deep within. Linley, you should indeed make a trip to the necropolis of the gods. Beirut laughed calmly. However, your strength isn't sufficient yet. Not yet sufficient. Linley was startled. In terms of power, he should be decent by now. He was definitely approaching the Azura level. But Beirut actually said his strength wasn't sufficient yet? Based on what I know, the reason you are at such a level of power has something to do with the Redbud Sovereign. Beirut laughed gently. Your true power is far weaker. Lord Beirut, when will it be enough? Linley asked. Beirut laughed softly. When you reach Bluefire's level. Bluefire's level? Linley was slightly puzzled, but then he understood. Actually, he wasn't in the mood to investigate the necropolis of the gods either. Yale's affair had caused him to feel mentally exhausted and worn out. He had no interest in going right now. Alas, your friend did indeed die an unjust death. Beirut let out a sigh. Unfortunately, I'm not the emissary of a Netherworld sovereign. Otherwise, I could go beg a Netherworld sovereign to have him help you find the undead which your friend's spirit was transformed into after dying and being drawn into the Netherworld. If a sovereign were to intervene, then it would be easy for the undead to regain its former memories. Linley was stunned. Spirits are drawn into the Netherworld. Linley's mind seemed to suddenly explode. Right. If a soul isn't destroyed, then a person hasn't truly died. Even if one is drawn into the Netherworld and becomes an undead, the soul will remain. They can regain their memories as well. Right, Boss Yale, Second Bro, Dixie, and my father. Linley's face instantly turned red. Red from excitement. Linley's greatest regret was his father's early death, and the unfairness of it. His father didn't know that he had gotten revenge and killed their enemies, and also didn't know that the Barrack clan had been restored to glory. And Yale, who had died so unjustly. his friend. Lord Beirut, Linley hurriedly spoke out. Lord Beirut, my elder brother, he, Delia spoke out hurriedly as well. Lord Beirut, then Boss Yale, he, Reynolds spoke out as well. Instantly, everyone began to ask questions frantically and excitedly. Book 18, Highgod, Chapter 12, Entering the Netherworld. Linley was so excited, he felt his heart was about to explode. He had never been so excited before. Father can regain his memory, and can come back to life. And Yale, George, Dixie, the depressing emotions he had felt the past few days suddenly disappeared. Linley was incomparably excited. He felt as though the world had instantly become colorful and beautiful. Don't be hasty. All of you, don't be hasty. Beirut quickly urged. Everyone forcibly repressed their excitement. I was speaking casually, just now. Beirut said hurriedly. After ordinary mortals die, their souls will enter the netherworld and become undead. There's no way for a Highgod to find the specific undead which a person's spirit became. Only the 7 netherworld sovereigns who rule the netherworld can find them. However, sovereigns are sovereigns, do you think that they'll help you just because you ask? Immediately, everyone fell silent. Linley felt his heart tighten as well. Sovereigns were lofty, proud individuals. They most likely wouldn't pay any attention to the request of a Highgod. If I don't try, how would I know what the result is? Linley said hurriedly. Whether it was for the sake of Yale, George, Dixie, or his father, Linley wasn't willing to give up. Give it a try. Maybe you'll succeed. Delia said hurriedly as well. Beirut shook his head helplessly. To do this, there are 2 great difficulties. The first is to find and see the sovereign, while the second is to have the sovereign agree to help you. These 2 difficulties are tremendously hard to overcome. Linley, I know you want to see your father and your brothers. But do you know where the netherworld sovereigns live? Linley was stunned. Where a sovereign lived? That was a deeply guarded secret. For example, the Redbud Sovereign. Although Linley had visited the Amethyst Mountains, he only later learned that place had been the residence of the Redbud Sovereign. To find a sovereign, even if you find the right location and the sovereign happens to be there at that moment, if the sovereign doesn't wish to meet you, what will you do? Beirut said. In addition, even if you see the sovereign, why would the sovereign so easily accede to the request of yourself, a mere Highgod? It was too difficult. I want to give it a try. Linley said determinedly. No matter what, I will not give up. There are a total of 7 netherworld sovereigns. I'll go searching for them. If the first one doesn't work out, I'll find another one. Beirut, hearing this, couldn't help but shake his head. You really are stubborn. Fine, then. Beirut nodded. With a wave of his hand, he made a 10-centimeter thick book appear. Linley, this book describes the netherworld. Take a look. It will help you understand the netherworld better. Thank you. Linley accepted the book. While in the infernal realm, he had never paid much attention to the affairs of the netherworld. He had thought that he would never go there, but who would have imagined that all of these things would have occurred? If you truly are going to go to the netherworld, then let me give you this bit of advice. Beirut said resignedly. This isn't really advice, I imagine you can think of it as well. When you go find the netherworld sovereigns, first find the emissaries of the sovereigns, there are quite a few emissaries, and you should be able to find them. If you aren't able to find them, then find a lord prefect of a prefecture. Those lord prefects might know where the sovereign that manages them is located. Linley nodded. Although it might be possible to find a sovereign through seeking out a sovereign's emissary or a lord prefect, would the emissary or lord prefect be willing to tell him? Continue carrying that medallion I gave you. Beirut said. The medallion, after all, represents the blood-rich sovereign. With that medallion, perhaps it'll be a bit easier for you. Linley's eyes lit up. Right, the medallion. It had been bestowed upon Beirut by the Blood-Ridge sovereign. That thing might convince a Netherworld sovereign to at least listen to what he had to say. Grandpa, thank you. Bibi beamed with wide eyes. If I didn't do this, you'd say that Grandpa is being stingy. Beirut laughed loudly. Bibi beamed. There was no question that he was going with Linley to the Netherworld. Thank you, Lord Beirut. Delia said gratefully as well. Beirut laughed, all right then. You have your plan. I'll go back now. If there's anything else you need, go to the Forest of Darkness and look for me there. After he spoke, Beirut transformed into a black blur, disappearing into the distance. In mid-air, Beirut turned to glance at Dragonblood Castle, a hint of a secret smile appearing at the corners of his lips. Just as I predicted. Only, I don't know if this kid is going to live up to my expectations or not. And then, chortling to himself, he flew back to the Forest of Darkness. After learning this news, everyone in Dragonblood Castle was in a state of excitement. But immediately afterwards, they felt a sense of pressure. To go ask for a sovereign to assist them, this was simply too hard. Everyone was worried about whether or not Linley would be able to succeed. They also feared that the sovereign might be enraged and kill Linley. Sovereigns shouldn't have bizarre, violent personalities, right? Wade said, worried. Don't speak rashly. Delia immediately scolded. Bibi laughed in a very certain manner. Don't worry. After the Netherworld sovereigns see the Blood-Ridge sovereign's medallion which the boss and I have, they shouldn't kill us. Bibi, although appearing outwardly confident, was still very nervous in his heart. After all, would a Netherworld sovereign necessarily give face to the Blood-Ridge sovereign? In fact, it might be possible that the Netherworld sovereign might just so happen to have a grudge against the Blood-Ridge sovereign. Nobody could be certain. Sovereigns view themselves as far above us. As long as we don't offend them, they won't lower themselves to kill us. Linley said calmly. As for this trip to the Netherworld, only Bibi and myself will go. Linley and Bibi had already discussed this through their spiritual connection. There was no telling what would happen on this trip to the Netherworld. If he and Bibi headed out by themselves, they would have nothing to fear. But if they brought others along, they wouldn't be able to protect them in a dangerous situation. Right. Delia, hearing this, nodded as well. Bibi. But Nissa was rather reluctant. We'll return soon. Bibi chortled. At this time, Linley's body split into two, as a fiery red-haired Linley walked out. Delia, my divine fire clone will remain here. And Nissa, if there's anything you need, you can just tell my divine fire clone. I will immediately know and notify Bibi. Linley laughed calmly. By leaving behind a divine fire clone, communication became easier. Nissa and Delia both felt slightly mollified. With Linley's divine fire clone present, they would know Linley's situation in the Netherworld at all times. The second day after Beirut's departure from Dragonblood Castle, Linley and Bibi decided to head out. In but a single night, Linley finished reading the book on the Netherworld, and gained a basic understanding of the place. The Netherworld. Sacred Undead Mountain. This was a great mountain, tens of thousands of meters high. The entire mountain was the color of white bones, and white skeletons could be seen throughout the mountain. At the peak of the mountain, there was an enormous, ancient castle that was entirely black and surrounded by black fog. This castle had already existed for countless years. Occasionally, metallic life forms would fly out from the castle, with some voices coming from within as well. The infernal realm had 7 teleportation locations. But the Netherworld only had 2. Sacred Undead Mountain was one of them. Hey, all of you, stand there obediently. A group of white-robed warriors shouted out casually. Within the enormous teleportation array, rays of light were shooting everywhere, with some figures appearing on occasion. These figures stared in surprise around them. These people were saints or demigods, with a very few gods. As for high gods, the chance of a high god coming was very low. Only at the saint level, and yet they came to the Netherworld. They really have come to throw their lives away. A black-haired, young-looking warrior in white robes kicked a middle-aged saint away, sending him flying out of the teleportation array into the corner of a wall. The person who had been kicked turned around angrily. "What are you looking at, kid? Do you want to fight?" The white-robed warrior smirked as he spoke. The middle-aged saint just gritted his teeth. Lowering his head and leaning against the corner of the wall, not daring to make a sound. Seeing this person didn't resist, the white-robed warrior couldn't help but shake his head and chuckle. Saints are everywhere in the Netherworld. If you don't learn to endure, you will probably die on the very first day. Booker Buletin Sier, you always like to tease them. A white-robed warrior in another corner laughed while drinking wine. The black-haired youth, Booker, laughed as well. If we don't help them learn the rules now, when they really enter the Netherworld, they'll die even faster. Quite a few people had already been teleported in by now. More coming. The black-haired, white-robed youth immediately turned to look. The enormous teleportation array once more lit up with that hazy glow, and two figures emerged from within. After the glow disappeared. High gods! The surrounding white-robed warriors immediately turned to look. Even the white-robed warriors who had been seated all came to their feet. It was very rare for high gods to come through the teleportation array. If one appeared, it generally meant someone was coming from another higher plane, and an extraordinary individual at that. The group of white-robed warriors stared carefully at these two figures. One was a brown-haired youth, while the other was a skinny youngster wearing a straw hat. The brown-haired youth's body suddenly lifted into the air, glancing around himself before saying, "This is the sacred undead mountain. It seems we will need to move to the south. Still, before leaving, let's take a trip around the undead realm." Hearing the words sacred undead mountain, these white-robed warriors immediately grew certain that these two came from other higher planes. "Fine, boss." The brown-haired man nodded slightly towards the nearby white-robed warriors, then led the youngster with the straw hat into the air, flying away from sacred undead mountain. Adventuring through the higher planes, how long will it be before I, too, am able to do this? But the teleportation cost truly is high. I've been here so many years, but I still haven't earned enough netherstones for a single teleportation. The black-haired youth in the white robes let out an admiring, praising sigh. The horizons were vast and endless. Dark black clouds covered the world, and tongues of lightning would occasionally flash out from the dark clouds, like dragons of lightning dancing about within. This was an empty, desolate plains. Two endless hordes of undead which stretched as far as the eye could see were arrayed into two camps, staring at each other. There were many skeletons, foul zombies, drifting, translucent wraiths, and also grim, forbidding black knights. There were also strange wights and ancient liches, all of which were separated into different levels. There were weak skeletons, but also skeletons at the saint level. Kabuzer Kabuletin Sier, you only have two choices, a booming voice shook the heavens. Submit to me or die. But the reply was just a cold laugh. Attack. Immediately, the booming voice roared in anger. Attack. Another voice, a cold, fierce one, howled as well. Immediately, the vast swarms of undead in the two camps attacked the other side wildly. A battle between undead was like waves crashing against each other. The entire world was filled with skeletal dragons, and skeletal griffins howled through the skies, while venomous fogs billowed out, filling the world. Large numbers of undead on both sides died. Right at this moment, the two armies of undead came to a sudden halt, as their leaders both stared towards the skies, Stunned. In mid-air, two figures flew past at high speed. The terrifyingly powerful aura they emanated was causing the countless undead below to feel terror in their hearts. This was an aura that was countless times more powerful than the auras of the two undead who ruled them. They didn't dare to resist it at all. But moments later, the two figures disappeared into the horizon. We just released a hint of our aura, but they were so terrified they wouldn't even dare move. Bibi laughed with a chortle. You really are bored, aren't you? Linley didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. Just now, when they had departed from Sacred Undead Mountain and began to fly towards the northern part of the undead realm to take a look, Bibi realized that his Highgod aura would cause these undead to be extremely terrified, and so he constantly released his aura, intentionally frightening those undead. As for Linley, there was nothing he could do with regards to Bibi's trouble-causing antics. The Netherworld was different from the infernal realm. It was just a single, terrifyingly enormous continent. This vast continent was even larger than the 5 continents of the infernal realm put together. The northern part of the continent had countless undead populating within it, and so this area was known as the Undead Realm. As for the southern part of the continent, this was the real, so-called Netherworld. As for the Sacred Undead Mountain, it was located at the borders between the Netherworld and the Undead Realm. Large numbers of undead are dying at every moment in the Undead Realm. Undead grow in power by devouring the spirits of other undead. What I fear the most is that the undead which Yale, George, and my parents have become have already been devoured by others. Linley was rather worried. Still, he flew with Bibi away from the undead realm, flying south towards the border it shared with the Netherworld.